And I remember when we arrived, when we come down this long road, there was a body in one of our blokes dead in the middle of the road. You're nervous. I mean, I don't really know whether you're scared or anything. I think it's because you're too stupid to be scared when you're that young. You sort of think, oh, this is exciting. I'll get out to shoot my rifle, you know. And we used to have to drive through, and it wasn't. They weren't friendly to us at all. You know, you couldn't trust them. I mean, you know, you'd look at the little kids, they might have a grenade or something. So when the next APC pulled up, and the officer and the medical officer and medic ran up, and they stepped on another one, an M16 mine, and blew up about 10 more blokes, about 20, 30 injured. You know. Yeah, the only thing was my family having 4 brothers in the army, and I always expected one of us to get it, you know. And when I come back, my grandmother just said to me, she said, "You're not the same boy, Steve." And I said, "No, I'm not."
Okay, so if you just want to start off and give us a summary of your life.
Well, I'm Stephen Laverty. I was born in Brisbane, 1947. Shifted to, I was in the Housing Commission camp at opposite the Royal Brisbane Hospital when I was very young. Then we shifted to Stafford, where I went to school. Went to school to grade 8. I didn't really do my grade 8. I left and went to work. Then I had a few jobs. I worked for Thurlow's Blinds. Then I went to the tannery, worked there. Quite a smelly job, but it was a lot of nice people working there. Then when I got about 17 and a half, I decided to join the army. I went into the army, signed on for 6 years, and in that time, when I went in, I was put in the Corps of Engineers. I applied for infantry, but I had 3 brothers in the infantry, so they wouldn't let me go in. So I went to engineers. Did my basic training at Perker station. That I was sent to Wakehold, 18 Field Squadron, and worked up in Tully doing the tropical trials. And then I was asked if I wanted to go to Vietnam, so I said yes. Went down to Canunga and did my month's course, whatever it was, down there. Then I went to Vietnam in 1967. Did 12 months in Vietnam. On coming home from Vietnam, I stayed in Brisbane for a couple of years in the army with 7 Field Squadron. Then I left the army. Started working for the Brisbane Gas Company, Shell Oil Company, and a couple other places, just driving trucks. Then I I went into the prison service for a while. Then I joined the Fire Brigade, the Brisbane Urban, and was Brisbane Brigade, Metropolitan Brigade. And then when that changed over to Queensland Fire Service, I stayed in there. I did about 20 years. Had problems with post-traumatic stress and obsessive compulsive disorder. So I had to leave the Fire Brigade, and then we shifted up to Ocean View up here where I live, and basically what I do now is I just occasionally help the Rural Fire Brigade, and I ride my Harley bike. That's about it. That's it. So.
What were their reasons for joining the army, your brothers?
Well, my brothers, they were all very, my eldest brother's a very smart fella, but the brother that died, Trevor, he joined first. He was about 4 years older than me, and he was in the railway and did all that sort of stuff, and he just one day decided, I'm going into the army. So he went into the army first, and then I think Lionel joined the next one, and then Barry joined, and they all went through through the training, and then they all finished up in the battalions. And at one stage there was my 3 brothers and my cousin, my cousin too, all in the same battalion, and that was at Nogra for a while, and then they split them up, and Raymond went over to, my cousin went over with 6th Battalion or as replacement over there, and Barry and Lionel were they went to Malaya and Borneo together. It was unusual because they were both in the same company and in the same section, which in a war zone you weren't supposed to do that. But we've got a photo in there of them both sitting in there having a smoke, and there was an advertisement for some Marlboro thing. They did it with them, and it was mainly done in America, the advertisement, but they had them sitting in the bush having a smoke. But then when they went back to Malaya, they transferred them both into two different in a group, companies, whatever it was. And then Trev went to Vietnam, and that was about 60. He went 66, 67, and then I was over there halfway through his tour, so I got over there in 67, and he came home halfway through my tour. So yeah.
Okay, so we got to you left school and went and worked in the tannery.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of working life was that like? Like how many hours a day? What did you get paid?
8 hours a day. It wasn't. I can't remember the pay, but it wasn't it wasn't much. You know, they were pound, shillings, and pence in those days. Might have been a couple of pounds or something like that. It was quite interesting, really. I would have happy to work there for years, but just that I decided. I decided to go into the Navy. That's why I went to the Army a bit late, because I went to join the Navy because my cousin Robert was already in there. But I went in to do the exam, and I didn't. In those days, when you did the exam, you had all these multiple questions, and like one of them might have been you got to answer 20 questions in 30 seconds or whatever it was. And then you go on to the next one, and there's more questions and a bit longer and all that. And, you know, I went in there and like sums, small add-up sums, 1 and 1 and all that, then you move on, progress on to the harder stuff. But I didn't realise that what you had to do, you only had, like say there was 20 sums, if you did 5 and got them right, it was more important than doing 20 and getting 5 wrong or 10 wrong, type of thing. So I was trying to do a lot. And anyway, what happened in the end, they said to me, oh, well, no, you didn't pass to get in, but would you like to join the Army with the Air Force? And I said, oh, I'll join the Army. And I didn't have to do anything. I just went downstairs and that was it. Joined the Army because I'd done all my medicals and all that sort of stuff. And it was just, they just took me downstairs and said, this bloke wants to go into the service. So I just went in because the Navy was the senior service, and then Navy, Army, and Air Force. So that means, you wouldn't have been a pilot in the Air Force, but I mean just as a general serviceman. And but I'm glad I didn't go in the Navy now. I like ships and that, but I'm glad I went to the Army and got the experience there, and it's good.
When you joined up, did you have to go through lots of medicals and things like that?
Yeah. Well, when I went in for the Navy, you had to do your psych. You had to go and see, I think it was a psych. You did your entrance exam. You get the little thing that you had to do psych, and then you had to go and do your eye tests, hearing tests. The eye tests were I didn't do the Army one, so I don't know whether they did the same in those days, but they were a lot of colour vision tests, because in the Navy, I suppose you had to have good colour vision because of the lights on the ships and things, and seeing in good distance, you had to do all that sort of stuff. And just a normal medical, the old touch your toes and all that sort of stuff.
How long was it between when you had joined up to when you went to training?
Oh, it wasn't real long those days. I joined up, might have been went in for the Navy thing. That same day I went downstairs and joined the Army, signed on and everything, and did all that. And then they called me in. Would be a week or two later. It wasn't that long later. And then I think it wasn't that long later. And then I don't know whether I got sworn in then. And then then we went straight out to Enoggera at, I think it's Fraser Paddock down the back of Enoggera there, and we just hung around there for a week until they got enough people to put them on the train and take them down to Kapooka. And
how many men were there?
I think when we left, it was in the 20-something blokes went down, something like that. There's a few of us went down, and got down to when we got down to Kapooka, we put in platoons, and then there was a heap of us there because they come from all over the place. Then everyone met down there, and that's when it started. You got off the bus, and that was it. Different world.
How did they break up the people into?
They just had them sorted out and just called your name out. Stand over there. You go here. You're in this shed. You're in this lines. You go to this lines, and you just went in there. And most of us went to the same area because, well, we were all in the same platoon, so we made up a platoon. And I just can't remember. There'd be 30 or 40 blokes in the platoon. I can't remember now. It wasn't a normal platoon, like an infantry platoon, but it was just you had C company. You had like a big company area, and you had different group A, B, and C type of thing. And I can't even remember who I was with. And then you sort of just went in there, and as I said, the first day you went in and got your hair cut, shaved all your head off, and then you went up and they gave you these. It's supposed to be a uniform, but it was more like, well, if anything fitted you, you were lucky, you know. Like, I mean, they just handed all this rubbish. It was sort of a Second World War a browny colour. I like not brown. Can't think of the colour. Khaki sort of colour. Yeah, and the trousers were big and the jackets were big, and you know, and you got your boots and gaiters, and that's the only thing that you got that was really sort of new. Was your boots and the gaiters. And you had to clean them and spit polish them and all that sort of stuff. And then you got your belt, which you had to clean up. And then you got your old Second World War webbing, which they had right through until Vietnam. And with the big water bottles, and they issue your rifle straight away. And you had first thing they said, issue the rifle, and you give you a number for your rifle, and remember your number. If you forget your number, you're in trouble, you know. So you remembered your own number, which is 12000496. And then you had to remember your rifle number, your bolt number, your rifle number. Can never lose, stay with you all the time. Then they issued out other weapons that we were going to use, and we just had them in our lockers. And when we used them, we had to clean them every night and all that sort of stuff. And as I said, they took you through and got all your gear, went back to thing. Then they showed you how to fold your socks, how to fold your underpants, where to put them, how to put them all in line. Don't let them go out this far. Put them over here. And then how to make your bed, and then and that was it. And you weren't allowed to go to the canteen for the first few weeks. You had to just do your training, and then that was it. And then after a certain period of time, you're allowed to go up to the canteen and have a beer after you finished your work, after you finished the day's training, which could be 6, 7 o'clock, depending on what you were doing.
So in that first couple of weeks, what kind of training did you do?
Everything was like basically running. Obstacle courses in the mud and all that sort of stuff. As I said, like someone does something wrong, down and give us 50, everyone down and give 50, push-ups, sit-ups, everything was just repetition, 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 up the hill, back down. If you went to your lunch, you all jogged to your lunch, you know, all in a group, in 3 lines, you know, and you all running together, left, right type of thing, you know, and the instructor would run beside you and call out the time and all like that. And then you did weapons lessons, like they'd go out and they'd have the SLR, and an instructor who would be a corporal would strip the weapon down and show you how to strip it down, put it back together, and then you do it, and then you did it to the stage where you're blindfolded. You could just do it, and when you strip your weapon, you put your weapon in certain order, so when it goes back, you can just pick it off the ground and throw it back together. So if it's at night time, you know, if something goes wrong, if it's a blockage, you can pull it apart, and then you can put it back together. Then they sitting there loading magazines, 20 rounds, you just load them up. Then you had to do tests, see how fast you go with the loading of the magazine. As I said, you did all IAs, which is blockages, like your weapon works, weapon stops. Do IA, you go through it all, magazine off, cock, check, you know, and you just constantly did that all the time until you got that used to your weapon. You knew it back to front. And then it went on to other weapons that they had there. They showed you the other weapons and you went through them. We went through grenade, allowed to throw a grenade, but they had their whole pineapple grenade, a big heavy one. Couldn't throw it very far. But you had to go through it. It was all done safely. You had to go down, sit in this little bunker system, and then they'd take you out one at a time, and then you'd hurl it down the paddock, and things like that, and boom, off it would go. Yeah, it was quite interesting. But mainly it was all physical, getting your body built up so you're physically strong enough. And then they had I think it was a 25 mile. We had a 25-mile march with your gear on near the end, and you had to do it in a certain time. Then they used to have a record for each platoon who was quickest to do it, and they normally put the tallest bloke with the longest stride out front, so that everyone, like at the end, like me, a little fella like me, you nearly jogged all the way. You know, it was just hard, and you got blisters on your feet. You had to walk a couple of kilometres out there, then you started and you went around, and you know, like if it was a hot day or whenever you went through, like the nights were cold, and I think, you know, like ours more, I think was sort of in the, when did I go down? March or something like that, around that period. So it would have been pretty warm down there, I suppose. But you had to keep going. I mean, and it was hard. You know, you sort of running, you're tired, your feet are aching, your feet are blistering, and they said, "Come on, keep going." And you had to go as your platoon, like in 3 lines, standing behind it, and that's harder to do than sort of walking by yourself, because you sort of you're not going to step on the bloke's foot in front of you and all this sort of stuff. And as I said, they had the big bloke at the front striding it out, because all the sergeants wanted to beat the other platoon's records. And I think we stopped once or something for a break and had a drink, and then we kept on going. But you had your water bottles, you could have a drink out of them. And no, it was hard, but it was rewarding. You know, once you finished it all, it was great. You know, you had your march out parade, and I think in those days your parents could come down, but Mum didn't come down. And I got a photo in there of a little march out on the march out parade. Each platoon had a different colour thing put on the top of their uniform, so you can tell. And as you went through, like you went in as a junior, like the ones that were nearly finished were the senior ones, and you were the junior ones, and you went through and you worked your way up to the senior one. Then you look down, you blokes down there, look at us, we're up here, you know. Sit in the pub and have a few beers at the night time, and look, yeah, we're big time guys. And that's the same as Duntry and all that. Same thing, you go through, you go from the bottom to the top. It's how life goes, yeah. And no, it was quite. I thought it was quite interesting, and you know, it was like, you know, you get the fumbles sometimes. And my thing was, every time I went, when everything happened there, the sergeants would say to me, "Oh, Laverty," and I'd say, "Yes." "Oh, have you got any brothers in the army?" I'd say, "Yes." "Oh, Barry, Lyle and Trevor." "Yeah." "Well, I hope you're as good as them, son." "Oh, right. You better be as good as them," and all this sort of stuff. And that was the pressure on you, you know, like for me all the time. And then eventually, as I got to know the sergeants, they were sort of all right, you know, because they knew me brothers and they knew me. And my brother Lionel eventually went back there as an instructor, you know. But they were pretty good. They were tough on you. But as long as you performed or tried to perform, they pushed you as hard as they could. And once you got through, you were through. And as I said, when you got near the end, you sort of become more friendly with your sergeants, because they were like your mates. You could see what they were trying to do. And the only ones I think that couldn't see what was trying to be done were dumb ones or something, because, you know, that happened all the way through the army. Even when you went back to Canungra later on, you went in knowing nothing. They said, "I don't give a damn what you'd done before." You went in knowing nothing, and they pushed you all the way through to the end. And as you went through, say the month there at Canungra, each week, like the first few days was just really hard, abusing you. The first week would be like that. The second week would be a little bit easier, but they'd be still making you work, but they wouldn't be yelling at you as much. And as you come to, say, the end of the third week, the sergeants were getting a little bit friendlier and talking to you like your mates, like they knew you. And by the time you end, they said to us, you know, "You understand why we do it. We have to do this. You have to be trained to this standard." And when you go to places like Vietnam, you realise you have to be. You can't just grab a rifle and run off into the bush and start shooting. So everyone's life depends on everyone else, and that's what they're trying to get you to work as a team. A section does a certain 10-man section or whatever it is. Each man has a job to do, and if you don't do your job, the bloke next to you could get killed, or you could get killed. So, and that's what it's all about. And it's not like just working in a bank. If you want to have a sit down in the corner somewhere, you can have it and bludge on your mate. But in the army, you can't do that, or the Air Force or the Navy, you can't, you know, you can't say, "Oh, I'll fix it up tomorrow." You know, if you're doing working on F111, I'll put that bolt back in tomorrow, or I'll check it tomorrow, and the bloody thing takes off and crashes. You know, that's all it takes. So that's why they're very strict on it, and it's good training. I reckon it should be more of it.
So you finished that month,
Mm-hmm.
and then what happened?
I think it was 3 months down there.
Oh, okay, it's 3 months of that training.
13 weeks, I think it was. Yeah. So that's about 3 months, isn't it?
So after that first 3 months, what happened then?
Well, as you go through the first 3 months, what happens is you get three choices. You had three choices. You picked. They said you got three choices what corps you want to go to. So when you first went there, I picked infantry engineers. And at the end, when you finish your training, you have to go in front your platoon commander and your sergeants, and then they've already been sitting back working out what you're good for, what you're not good for. Have the little all your results about everything's written down in your files. Then you went in one by one. You sat down, and they said, "Okay, how do you think you went?" type of thing, and what corps would you prefer? And you'd say, "Oh," I said, "infantry." I said, "Oh," they said, "Look, at this stage, no," they said, "because you've got three brothers in infantry, and we think it's unfair on your mother. So we'll put you in engineers." I said, "Oh, well, I want infantry." And they said, "No, engineers." Oh, okay, that was it.
Why did you want infantry?
Well, I just like the infantry. I just like what the infantry do. You know, that type of thing. That you're in a section. You work like in a section, then in a platoon. You're a section part of which is a part of a platoon. The platoon's part of a company. The company's part of the battalion, and it's basic sort of like not basic work, but just patrolling. You get certain things to do in the section. You could be a forward scout, and it's totally different to the engineers. Like that's engineers that I seen. Well, I thought, well, just going to go and build bridges or something, or build. There's two lots of engineers: a construction engineer and a field engineer. And you can, when you're an engineer, you can go to either. It doesn't make any difference. But a construction engineer builds buildings and airstrips and things like that. Where a Field Squadron engineer, he's into mines and booby traps, laying minefields, driving bulldozers, that type of thing, the heavy sort of side of it. But you can still do both, you know. You're trained and you can go into either side of it. But I just wanted to be infantry like my brothers, you know. They were all infantry, and I wanted to be in there with them. And my cousin was in the infantry, so one of my other cousins, and I thought, oh, I'd like to do that. But I didn't get it. I got sent to engineers, so that was it. And that was down at School of Military Engineering in Sydney, Liverpool. And so that's where we were sent to there. There's only... So in those days, what happened was most of the people, they went off for the infantry because the Vietnam War, and that's another thing they said, the Vietnam War was sort of kicking on a little bit too, starting to get a bit more. We had a battalion, I think we had a battalion over there at the time, and they said, well, they wanted more, most of the blokes went infantry, and yet, like say, you might have had, say, catering corps might have got one person, signals might have got two, engineers might have got five, you know, but most of them went to either infantry, tanks. They had the allocation each 3 months. They had so many allocated to each corps, and when you went to infantry, you went straight to the School of Infantry, and you started training straight away because you went down as a big group. But like us, when we went to engineers, there's only a few of us, so we went there and we had to wait until our course got enough people. So we had to wait until we had about 25 people. So that took a few weeks. And so we just mucked around cleaning the floors and doing all this, doing nothing really, just going out, doing nothing, you know, just sitting around. We had a bit of a bludge. And then we started our training, which took, I think, 7 weeks. We did 7 weeks training, I think, which included, well, you had to learn all about plant, all the different sorts of plant, like compressors and generators, jackhammers, building Bailey bridges. You had to go through all that. Then you had to go into booby traps, a little bit of mine warfare, working out sort of how much explosive it would take down to blow down the bridge, and where would you place it on the bridge, and all into that side of thing. So that took a bit of time, and then you were tested on everything. So it was a fair bit involved in it, like learning. I mean, a lot of it was, this is a shovel. I mean, that's a shovel. Yeah, it's not a pick. Yeah, it's a shovel. Yeah, and that type of, there's that part of it too. They had it, and this is the sharp end and that's the blunt end. But like you had to know, as I said, like generators, how to start them, how to operate them, because they had big generators, and it was just had to have a basic knowledge. And then if you went into a unit and you were in charge of generators or something, well, that's when you learnt more about them. Not that I don't think there's a real lot to learn about them, but like Barley Bridges was hard because they're just like Meccano sets. They go together a certain way, and everyone has to work as a team to put them together, and the officers are in charge, because you build a Barley Bridge and you just can push it across the river, and it's got to be built on rollers and slid across, and you've got to deck it. And then we had little boats, little boats, and we used to build bridges on top of them and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it was all Second World War stuff, but I mean, that's what we had to learn.
So you actually constructed those there?
Yeah, we had a river behind. There was a river behind us, so we had to do that. Learn how to operate the boats, outboard motors, things like that. It was all into that. We went out and blew up some, like just used explosives to blow up a few things. Had to learn how to do cutting charges, which is like they might have a big lump of steel, and you have a cutting charge which is dome shape, and what happens is you can make them out of any sort of explosives and put a, say, 50% piece that big, and you build your dome over the top with the explosives, and you set it off, and it'll blow the 50-cent piece straight through the steel. You learn all that sort of stuff, and how to time your, like if you're going to blow up a bridge, you can't just go and light the wick and then sit back and wait for it to go off. You've got to have it timed so that it gives you enough time to walk away from it, sit down, and then you know when it's going to go off. So you have to cut the det cord and burn it, the first couple of pieces of it. Then you burn the next length, a foot long, and time the foot. And then you multiply it by what distance, and then you go back that distance. Got to be sitting back a fair way, and then you just set the charges off. Boom, up they go. So.
And what about the day? Was it a bit more regular than what it was basic training?
Yeah, it was more. You had your book. You got your big engineer book, and it told you like each week what you had to do, and then it was more. You didn't have to run as much type of thing, but you was still regimented. You had to go in your group and all that sort of stuff, and march and down the road, and then you had then they split you up in little groups. Like they might have so many doing a generator, talking about a generator, and so many doing a jackhammer or how to set that up. And then when you went on to things like the barley ladder, it was like the whole platoon or whatever it was would have to do that, because it was all lifting. Because all these each section was pretty heavy, so you might have six blokes lifting one section, and then you bring it out and you put it down, and the next bloke will put the bolt through it and join them together, just like a Meccano set. And the officers, their job basically, this was part of their training too, they had to line it all up so that when you pushed it across the other side, it all lined up. But they did that on dry ground at first. You just pushed it onto each other because they didn't want it to go in the river. And then we had the boating. We used to go down and do the boating. It was the same. You had to learn about the outboard motors, and then just sort of you had to drive them around, and then you just sort of had to park the boats beside each other and build the bridge across. And then, as I said, you used to go down and do like they had a big bridge. I can't think of the name of it, but we had to go down there and calculate how much explosives we needed, and there is a formula for it, and I've still got it in my book out there. And we used to calculate it with TNT, and then I think later on it was plastic, but we didn't really have plastic over here because it was modern stuff, and the Australian Army couldn't afford it or something. But we had old TNT that we played with. It was normally all sweaty and everything, dangerous, and I was just trying to get rid of it. But when we went overseas, we got plastic explosives. Not at first, but eventually we got the American plastic explosive, which was good, easy to mould and things like that. But as I said, they taught you about booby traps, and they like little booby traps. Some are push-pull, and some are just pull, and try to get you confused and set them up. So And there wasn't as much as I thought about that, especially when that after the explosion at Enoggera, sort of quietened down a fair bit. Then they took all the M16, not the M16, the Claymores off us. We started to learn about the M16 jumping jack, which has come to prominence in Vietnam. It was an American thing. We started to learn about that, like how to prime it, how to charge it, how to take the pins out of it, how it worked, like the 2 explosion bags in it. When you stepped on the 3 prongs, it pushed down and fired the top charge. The charge went down and hit the bottom charge, blew it out the ground, then she blew up. The killing radius of it, which is pretty bad. Then we went into a few little anti-personnel mines, little foot mines, and then some of them were what we talked about were anti-tank mines, but they're basically Second World War type anti-tank mines, things like that.
Were they more concerned with the setting of these mines or the delousing of them as well?
Well, not a real lot of. I didn't learn much about delousing at all. It was what a mine, how you would run a mine, put a set of minefield up. How many like you might have 1 anti-tank mine and 6 anti-personnel mines. How those set up, how you'd lay it. Like so, you have to lay it. You use tape. You'll run your tape down and you work down your tape, and you'll have 1 crew planning this side, another one in the middle and back. So you don't walk back over it. You keep moving one way. That type of thing, and how to make your where to put your breaching, like so where it should end, so you can get across. All that sort of stuff. Yeah, and then also into wire, putting your cat wire up, which is your barbed wire entanglements. There's a lot went into that because there was different types. There was Cat 3, and where you had 3 coils of wire on the ground and then 2 on top, and in between pickets, and then you had your normal your entanglement where it went across the ground, and that was normally before you hit the big wire. And then you had what was that? Oh, in the bunker, making bunkers, like how to build a fighting bay, fighting pit correctly, filling sandbags and all that sort of stuff. So it went into that. By the time you did all that, and how to dig a hole and build a bloody bunker and things like that. But the bunkers I mainly built in Vietnam were totally different. They were bigger. I had a photo in there of one, one that we were building when I was over there. It's finished. I think they finished it after I left and went into one troop. But it was a pretty big bunker, and as I said, that's what we basically did. The barbed wire stuff was used to pain in the butt.
Did that course involve an exercise at all, like away from
the
school?
No, the only exercise I think we did there, we did an exercise down at Kapuka. That was the final exercise. We had to attack this hill and sneak up in the dark, and they fired flares off and all that sort of stuff, and had a couple of rounds to bang away at like blanks, and but it was sort of hilarious. No, I think the main exercise was the going down, sitting around working at the bridges and what you blow them up with and how much and where to cut them and all that sort of stuff.
Where'd you go from the school?
I went from there to 18 Field Squadron out at Waco. I think I was in my mates all got transferred. I think it was 21 Field Squadron or something like that. They got transferred. A lot of them got transferred to 21 Field Squadron. It went back to Borneo. It was the last tour of Borneo, but I was underage or something, so I couldn't go. But I found out years later that I could have got my mum to write and say that I was old enough and I could have went. But they all went over to Borneo. Well, a few of them went over to Borneo. Got their first ribbon. They had it before me, medal and everything. But they did a lot of. All they were doing was finishing this road off over there. They had infantry protecting them. And they did. It was in wet weather and pretty rough over there. So I went up to, as I said, I went to Waco, and then that's where I sort of did my driving, get my licence, and didn't do a real lot there at all. Just hung around there. Yeah.
So at that stage, did you sort of have any ideas what the army had in store for you?
No, not really. While I was down there, mate and I were walking along at School of Military Engineering, we'd seen this little ad, and it was this bloke climbing down this rope with a beret on and a rifle on his back, and an SAS it said. So we thought, that sounds good, you know, parachuting and all that sort of stuff. He was about 21 or something. He was a big guy. Anyway, so we said, oh, we'll put in. So we both put in for it, and we got called into. They had to go into Sydney to meet the board, go to the board, and I did the first interview, and then we went back for the next interview. Some people didn't get past the first one anyway. I went back in, and I think there was about 4 people on the board. I think one was a SAS bloke in charge. There was a padre or something like that, or maybe a psych, I can't remember. All high officers rank, and we went in, and I was waiting for the last interview. Last time we went in to find out how we went, and my mate went in first, and he went in and came out and said, I'm going over there, you know. Anyway, when I went in, they said, oh look, they said you did quite all right. They said, but you're too young. They said the way the system works with SAS at the time, they said you've got to come over to Western Australia. That's if you pass the Carter course, you know, and I don't think I would have passed it because I was too immature. But the Carter course was a very hard Carter course, you know. But if I would have been older, I would have been able to go and do the Carter course. But whether I would have passed, physically I would have passed it, I reckon. But mentally, I don't know. But they said no, and they said, look, roughly what's happening is with Vietnam. Once you finish your Carter course, you basically do your para course. Sometimes you mightn't get that done, and then you basically ship straight out. So they said you wouldn't be old enough, and you can't be just hanging around, because it was at that time it was getting off the ground pretty well. It wasn't only had a couple of squadrons, I think, and you had to go to New Guinea and run through New Guinea and Borneo, I think. So I said, they said you can't get in. So I just went back to my unit. But I'm sorry I never pushed it on further. But
how old were you then? 17.
No, I was about 18, just over 18. It might have been 18 and a half by then. But I was still 19 to go overseas. I think it was 19 to go overseas, and especially in that. But I did find out later a bloke who was 18 went over, but he was the youngest bloke to go over in SAS by the SAS book anyway.
So what happened after Tully?
Well, while I was there, that's where the sergeant offered me a plant course. The plant course come up, and he called me, and he said, "Do you want to do the plant course?" And this mate of mine had gone over to Borneo. He'd come back at this stage, and he was up there, and I think he got put on the plant course. And another mate of mine, Daryl Minette, he was up there with me, and I knew he wanted to do a plant course, so I said, "Oh well, you want to do it?" I said to the sergeant, "We'll let Daryl go and do it, because I'm not interested in getting dust all over me, and doing that sort of, oil and grease and yuck." Anyway, so that's what happened. But about a week, wouldn't be that long after that, the sergeant came up and said, "Do you want to go to Vietnam?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "When can you leave?" And I said, "Well, I've got to play football on Sunday for North Queensland, so can I leave Sunday?" He said, "Sunday straight after football, head off, get the train and go back." So that's what I did. I got the train and headed back to, we went back to Wacol, and then they bussed us down to, I think we went down to Sydney first, or went to Canungra, I'm not too sure. I think we went to Canungra first or something, I can't remember now. And we did the month at Canungra, and that was sort of different sort of world, but it was good. I mean, it was like the real army then. There was the real soldiers then, you're running around and getting yelled at again.
Can you tell us about some of the things you did there?
Well, a lot of it was like the obstacle courses were hard. You had to jump and climb over the walls and jump into dirty, stinky water and swim through it. And then you had like a course where you had to work your way through in a group, and you had to work out how to get across swinging bridges and do all that sort of stuff in certain times. You went to the range. We had the sneaker ranges where you'd walk through the jungle. You had a F1 machine gun, and I think you had 3 magazines. You had to load so many rounds in each one. You had to place them in your pockets, and as you went through, the sergeant would walk through beside you, and at certain places you had these things you'd hit, and the target would jump out. It could be, anywhere. And then you had to fire a burst of 3, and count your rounds as you went, so that you knew when you changed magazine for the next one, and that was part of it. You had to keep going through that, and then the other sneaker range was you sat in a bunker, and they pulled these levers, and these targets used to come up from somewhere. Could be right in front of you, and then you had to shoot them. I remember the first few, you pulled the lever and I couldn't see blood. I think they were right in front of me. and behind a log, but it was pretty bushy then. The next time I went through it was cleared, so it was a bit better. But no, that was very good because you're really using the weapons, you know. Then you went out and did a bit of long shooting with your SLRs, and then you did. And when you first got there, they took you. They said, you know, you run everywhere, and at all times you're ready for anything. So all threw our packs on and went out to bloody out on the trucks, and we pulled up and we all jumped out the trucks, and of course we're all don't stand. They call it killer group. Don't stand in a group. Spread out. Because everyone got out, stood in a group, and they had these primers with the dead in it. Just threw one amongst everybody. I'm not too sure if that was a time one landed in the bloke's pack and he had to drop his pack. They'll kill you. I mean, they blow a pretty big hole in the ground. They just lob them. Boom, shit, bang. That was it. Don't stand in a kill group. You know, if you stand together and someone lobs a grenade, you're going to cop it. So, and that's how they started. And then you did your infantry contact drills up and down the mountains, just continuously, like you'd be walking along in a section, next minute contact right, someone would fire a shot, one of the young blokes that had there instructing, and he'd fire a shot, and then you'd have to go and contact right and do that action, contact right, do the normal thing, gun to the high ground, rifle group to the other side, fire and movement, then your gun group would fire, cover the rifle group and do all that, and then the final assault, and then just as you finish that, you just get grouped, next minute, bang, contact left, contact rear, and you'd be up halfway up the mountain, so you have to run all back down the mountain, then you'd turn around and run back up the mountain again, and over big boulders, and it was, you know, it was constant. Everything you had to do was, you know, straight away, no mucking around, you'd be buggered, keep going, you know. Yeah, it was pretty hard. And then you did, they sent you down the back, and they had the old Vickers machine gun, water-cooled machine gun, and you had to go across, you had to start off, you went across this one wall, I think, into the gully, and you had to jump across this big opening with dirty water in it. You had to jump across that and run across, and you had to go under the barbed wire, and the machine gun fired over you and all that sort of stuff. And then when you got through all that, you had to jump up and do an assault at the end of it onto this certain area. So you just did the assault. And then they, near the end, they had was a exercise. You had to go out and you went out as a platoon sort of thing, and you walk through the jungle sort of thing up there, and they did the contacts and all that sort of stuff. And then you harboured up overnight. And I remember, it's funny, we harboured up and everyone had to go on picket, so everyone had to do a picket. And normally you run a line around so you know where you're sleeping, so you know where to go to the gun. Everyone just sits on the gun, and I remember I went down on the gun, and I must have been one of the first on the gun. Anyway, it got dark, you know, didn't mind, it was dark, really dark. And so and it was cold too, because I'd left my gear webbing there, and I went down and did the gun, and I hopped up, and I started to walk back. It was my shift was finished, and I started to walk back to where my position was. Anyway, I thought, Jesus, I'm walking a long way. And I kept on walking and walking and walking. Anyway, I come to the top of the hill. Looked over, it was all, oh. So I turned around, I thought, well, I come from down there, so I just walked straight back down the hill, see. And as I'm walking down, someone says, you're dead. Who's there? And I said, Steve. Oh, shit. He said, go down. He said, I said, I'm lost, I don't know where I am. He said, oh, just straight behind me down there. It was one of the section commanders. Oh, right. So I went down. I still couldn't find my gear. So I said, oh, bugger this. So I just walked around and laid down on the ground and went to sleep. I thought it must be pretty close. Anyway, about 3 in the morning or something, the sergeants come off with these explosives and started throwing them at us. Boom, boom. It was like comedy capers. Everyone started running everywhere, you know, oh, get over here. And next minute, boom, they run up this way, boom, run. Anyway, and what they said to us, when you've been hit, you've got to get back to a certain point. So we all just took off down and luckily when the flares went, I could see my gear, so I grabbed all my gear, and we just all hurtled off down the side of the mountain. Then we went along the road and found our way back to our regrouping place, and we went to sleep there. But it was a bit of fun. I mean, we would have been all killed if it was for real, but you know, but it was interesting, yeah. It was, and we laid there all night in my boots. I remember in the morning I had ice on my boots because you only had your greens and stuff, so you didn't have any winter gear, so it was pretty cool. But I don't even know what time of the year, but I don't think it was full winter because we would have froze to death. So and that was, and then we sort of went back and did our. Well, you had to go and they showed you the tunnels. They had like an area where they had tunnels and things, and they sort of showed you that. What happens, how they do a search of the tunnels, and then you went back and we just sort of, we did navigation, all that sort of stuff. You had to go through your navigation, map reading and things like that. And they did talks on Vietnam and, things you have to do, and they handed out some books and things, and some books with the Vietnamese language in it, which, all sounded the same to me, and I couldn't pronounce half the stuff anyway. And so they did that sort of thing, and then and as I said, as you were there for a while, the night time you're allowed to go up and have a beer, so that's what we did. We went up and have a beer, and in the end, the sergeant would come and sit and talk to us. We had one problem with one sergeant. Someone threatened to kill him, but he pushed one of the older blokes. This bloke was in his 40s, and we were all buggered. It was at night time, and the maintenance run along this dirt road, and there was a big drop on one side. Well, big drop, if you fell down, you'd be hurt. And he come up behind him and shoved him. And he had his rifle in his hand, he spun around, and he was going to bury the sergeant with the rifle. And we all said we wouldn't see a thing. Anyway, the next day, that sergeant, there was another sergeant with him at all times. Yeah, so they got the message. It was getting to the stage, it was stupid to do what they did. And this bloke just had enough, and we weren't going to dog. We were backing him, not the sergeant. So that went over all right. But in the end, everyone sort of got on all right after by the time they come to the end, everyone understood what was going on.
So when you look back now at your time at Canungra, how valuable did you see that as well?
Oh yeah, I think it was. That's what saves your life. It's reaction. It's doing something constantly and being yelled at and makes you thinking. You're thinking all the time, like as I said, kill group. Don't stand in a kill group, and that's in your head all the time. It's like even to today, some places where I sit with my back to things, or I'm getting better now. I can sit most places, but there's certain things you do, and you're always ready for something. I'm always like that. Even when I worked for Bramble Security, in the fire brigade. That always played with me. Always made sure there was nothing at me back. Always watching, and that's how it is, and that's how you get trained, and that's how you survive. You can't survive everything. If someone shoots from behind a bush and you're walking along, well, that's unfortunately you're the first bloke he sees and you get hit. You can't do anything about that. But the rest of the blokes will do what they have to do after that.
At that time, what did you know about what was happening in Vietnam?
Oh, well, I just heard that there was, Vietnam was going, and there's a bit of a, war on over there, and I think Long Tan might have happened by then. I'm not too sure. I think that happened around that time. But there's always stuff in the paper, about the Americans being knocked over, or the Americans winning this battle, and I believe we won nearly every battle. Well, they won nearly every battle they were in, and we won all our battles, but. That's the way it went. But I was right up on it. I knew that it was there, and there was all that talk about it, and there was not a lot of engineers at the time were coming back, but because we were such a small sort of a group compared to the infantry. The infantry, had a battalion. We only had, I can't think. Say there was 500 men or 600 men in a battalion. We'd only have in a squadron a couple of hundred. We were only a lot smaller than they were, and. So you knew what was going on, and everyone was sort of wanted to do it. Everyone that I knew wanted to do it. There's no one I knew didn't want to go to Vietnam, Nasho or whatever it is. That's why I always laugh and I say, "Oh, I didn't want to go." I say, "Bullshit." Matter of fact, in those days, especially in the engineers, you could have said, "Oh, I don't want to go," and someone else would have taken your place. Infantry is a different thing. If you were in a battalion and that battalion was being formed and going, there's no way in the world you're getting out of it, no matter what you did, unless you cut your leg off. And then they still might give you a crutch and tell you to go. But the other corps, unless it was a whole unit going, you had the opportunity to give it to another bloke, like I did. I could have said no, I don't want to go, and they would have given it to someone else. But I wanted to go, and everyone else. I know everyone else in my unit wanted to go. So, and I was the only one that went that time.
Where to from Canungra?
From Canungra, I went back to. School of Military Engineering, where we waited around there for our posting, because our posting was one-on-one one for one, you know. Where the battalions went over as big groups, we went over one for one, which I think was harder for us than them because they all come back together. But no, I went to there and I waited until I was sent over, and we just went down and got on a big jet and flew over.
What was your impression of Tan Son Nhut?
Busy. I mean, there's planes taking off all the time, jets and passenger planes and fighter planes. It was just so big. I mean, there was all these sort of bays where all the planes were parked in. It was a very big place. I think it was the busiest place in the world at the time, and it was just sort of. Well, the airport wasn't that much. It was just a building, you know, sort of thing. I can't remember the airport. I can't even remember going into the airport. We just got off the plane and we just all hung around, and sort of waited for our bus. We got this bus to Fort Apache, I think it was called, Fort Apache. I mean, the bus was all an old bus that had wire on the windows and everything like that. That was a bit unusual. You thought, oh, what's this? It's supposed to be on our side.
What was the first thing that hit you when you went down the stairs of the aircraft?
Oh, I think the temperature, like the heat, and then the smell. Like it was like a musty sort of a smell, you know. It's just an unusual smell of the place. Totally different to what we were used to, and the heat, and yeah, it just smelled differently, and like it was so busy. You know, I mean, you just people everywhere. When we got on the bus and we sort of drove out, but it wasn't that far from there. We had to drive. It was a matter of fact, it seemed quite unusual. They called it we're going to Fort Apache or something. And I thought, oh, going out to this big fort thing, but we just drove through all this swampy, not swampy area, poor people's areas, you know. And we just come along. There's this big gate type of thing. Oh, that's it at Fort Apache. So we went in there, and we weren't allowed outside there. So we all got off the bus, and they allocated us to these big long, well, they were sort of sheds. They had the roof and a bit of timber up the side, and it was all screened all around it, so you could look out. And they said that's where you go. I think there's a PX, so you could go to the PX, but I don't think I did that. I just went and laid down. But out the back, they had this big wire enclosure where it had all these crashed helicopters that were being blown up and dumped, and garbage stuff all over them, and they were sitting there thinking, oh shit, what have we got myself in the air, you know? And it just seemed so unreal. I mean, and all these people, like all the Vietnamese were walking around. Vietnamese were walking around the base, walking everywhere. I thought, oh well, you know, must be all right, you know. What
was the mood like amongst all the fellas?
Oh, I think it was sort of quiet, really. I suppose everyone was sort of quiet. Everyone, I think, was sort of trying to anticipate what was going to happen. You're thinking, oh, what are we doing? You know, like, you know, where are we going from here? What's it look like? Where we're going to go to? Because you didn't really know. You know, you just sort of sit there thinking, oh, it's going to be like this, but we knew we were going up to Nui Dat, most of us. So some were going to Vung Tau, and most of us, well, the others were going up to Nui Dat. Yeah, no, so we just, I think it was the next day, we just went down to the airport again in the bus, and then they had the caribous there, and we just all climbed on the caribous, and they just took off, and then flew for a while, and then they look out the window, and here's this daggy looking place down there with tents. So we landed and hopped out, and there was I think there was a bloke in a Land Rover, and he picked up about 4 of us. And then we drove up. I don't know. They didn't all come to my squadron, so I went to one Field Squadron, and then I just sort of went into the duty officers, handed me paperwork over, and said, "I'm here."
So you were a loner from the engineers, were you, at that stage?
Yeah, I was just by myself. Yeah, and the bloke I suppose was replacing. I either went that day, left maybe on the plane that I come on. I didn't even know who I replaced, and so I just went to the duty office, and they said, "Oh, you're on," because I was posted to 21 support troop. I didn't even know what a support troop really did at the time. I just said, oh, I'm a support troop, 1 Field Squadron, you know, 21 support, 1 Field Squadron. And so I just went along there, and they just said, you've got someone to take me down to this tent. And they said it was on the perimeter. And they said, that's your bed there, which was just an old stretcher with a skeeter net around it. They had same stretchers, but they had nice little boxes and things, and mine was just a day. So and I never improved it. I just left it as it was, and so I was there, and I didn't really do much. I just sort of sat around. They said you're a driver, and I just sort of drove. I didn't really do much. I went sort of. You're supposed to stay in the base for a month, get acclimatised, but that didn't happen. I drove the sergeants down to Vung Tau sometimes, and not so much officers, mainly sergeants. Went down to Vung Tau and did the same old thing. They went and did something, and I just went and had a beer. And one time I went down there and I went with the sergeants, and we all went into the American sergeants' mess. I do little deals or something, and we all went in there and had our dinner, and then we went over to the Americans had all their buildings down there were all sort of got 2-story buildings, timber. The bottom floor nearly always had the bar and a jukebox or something like that, and the top floors where they lived, all done up nice, like our tents, and that would look pretty bad compared to it.
Actually, can you give us pretty good detail on what your living conditions were like with the tents and that?
Yeah, the tent was just the old tarp tents. They had the old army ones, and they had your floor was sort of your old pallets, and then you had your sandbags built up about 2 or 3 high around it, and then you just had your bunks. There's 4 bunks, one on each corner, and some people had boxes they used for putting their clothes in and stuff like that, timber boxes and that. And you had we didn't have sheets or anything, so we must. Oh, did we? I can't remember. I can't remember we had sheets. I thought we did, but maybe I was wrong. But we just had a little bed there, and then we just sort of all our gear was shoved in there. That was it. And then in our area, like where I was, then you had a bunker. You had to go to this bunker. You had to do pickets of a night time and all that sort of stuff. Each one had to share it. We had a bunker right behind ours, but no one would get in it because I reckon there were snakes in there. So, but it was a Dagow one. It must have been one of the original ones. But they built this real big one out beside us, and they were building another one on the other side of us. That was part of my job. I was helping build that. And so, we just used to sit around there, and then when it was your time to go and picket, I normally start a picket in the afternoon, at 4 or 5 o'clock or something. During the day you didn't have pickets on, and then you just went through the night, 2-hour shifts, and they had little, like, it was all bunded up, and you had your machine gun pit at the opening at the front, and you can go in the back, and they had little, like underneath all the sandbags, I think you had a room where 3 or 4 people could sleep in there. And you just went up on your shift and you sat on the machine gun. You sat in a chair we had built there. You can move around, and you had your machine gun sitting there.
So how many blokes would be on picket at any one time?
About 4, 4 blokes, yeah. And one bloke would be awake. You did 2-hour shift or something. One bloke would be awake for 2 hours, and then go and get it. Then you'd go and relieve, get the other bloke to come up and do it. That's if they stayed awake, of course. But outside our area was there was barbed wire. Then there's a road, and then there's a minefield outside ours. And at night time you couldn't see much anyway. Then they gave us a night scope, American night scope. It used to fit on the Armalite rifle, and but I don't think it was a very good one because I couldn't see much through it. Still looked black and everything to me, but.
But your SLR was still your personal weapon?
Yeah. No, at that time, no. I changed from when I got there. I got an Armalite. I was a bit smart. I thought I'll get something lighter. So when we went through, I just said, "Can I have one of those?" And the bloke, "Yeah, you can have one of those." So I used that.
Did you have to train up on that as well, or?
Yeah, well, you had your rounds, so I just went down to they had a pit and just went down and fired it. It was basically the same, and then you had to go and strip it and clean it. So once you've stripped it and cleaned it, you sort of knew about it.
Could you compare the two for us and tell us what the advantages and disadvantages were of them?
Well, the SLR was far better hitting power. If you hit someone with one round from an SLR, they're not going to go very far. The Armalite, mine jammed on me a couple of times. I found out later that it was the bolt. They changed the bolts around eventually. There's something wrong with the bolt. Don't know what it was. It was like, well, one time it jammed, I think, or twice it jammed, and then another time the round expanded in my chamber. And but the SLR was more reliable. With the SLR, you could put on it had a 20 round magazine, but we can take the AR magazine off, which is a bigger one, 30 round. You can whack that on if you wanted to. But it was just a bit heavier, but it was far better for as a stopping power. But the Armalite, I just took it because I just thought it'd be lighter. And then really, when I went out with the infantry and I was working sort of in the tunnels or caves and that, like if someone else went in with a pistol or something behind you, you could go in after them with an Armalite or something like that. It was a bit lighter, even though you couldn't go too far with an Armalite. In caves you could, but the SLR you couldn't have taken it in. It's just too big.
And then if you were working doing something, would you just have to sling your rifle, or would you just...
No, we weren't allowed to have slings on rifles. The Australian Army never had slings on rifles in those days, yeah, because you always had to be ready. You carried your rifle everywhere, and everywhere you went. Toilet, sat it beside you in the toilet. Went to bed, it was beside you. Didn't have to put it in bed with you, but it was beside you. Yeah, just everywhere. You went down the PX or whatever it was, down to you had to carry a rifle. Everyone had rifles, you know.
So basically you had picket every night and you're in the bunker?
Yeah, well, nearly every night, yeah, every night, sort of, not quite every night, but you might have a couple of nights off, and you'd be able to go up to the boozer. They had a like a, not a canteen, big shed, and had a bar at the end and all these different tables. Like one troop had their table, 2 troop had theirs, and then like 21 support would have had theirs. Then you would have had electrical mechanic engineers, they had their little tables, you know. And then you sit down there and you just go up to the bar. And when we first got there, you could buy whatever you wanted to. You could have spirits if you wanted to. You can go up and buy a carton of beer if you wanted to. That's what some of us used to do. We used to go over, because we had a water point just over from where we were, and we knew the bloke in the water point used to make ice. And we'd go over there and get ice, and I had my big tin trunks. So I used to throw the ice in and get a carton of beer and put that in there. And you know, when you finished at night time, you could go back and sit there and have a few beers in your tent, you know. Eventually, some blokes were on the spirits, but they closed that down after a few people shot themselves. So they wouldn't allow us to have spirits. Then later on, they wouldn't allow you to take a beer away from the canteen unless it was opened. But we used to open about 15 beers and take them away, so, you know, and then drink them hot.
Use your initiative.
Yeah.
So how often would you sleep in your tent then, as opposed to being in your machine gun pit?
Oh well, I suppose no, I could have been right. It might have been say 3 nights in your pit, in your tent, and then a night on picket. I did 14 nights straight in the bunker because only because I volunteered, because I got in trouble, and I decided to take that instead of doing other stuff. You know, I got CB. I had to do CB, but what I did, I said, well, I'll go and do the bunker, and the blokes that were on the bunker could have a rest. But they used to supply me with a 6-pack of beer because I wasn't allowed to drink either. But we used to take the M60 rounds out of the tin, and then put the 6-pack in it. And we used to carry the rounds down and sit out there. And yeah, you could sit on top too. Early in the night, you could sit on top in your deck chair. Had a deck chair, those rubber plastic chairs, and you'd sit up there and look out, and you know. So we used to go down there and have a beer. And that's where the Sergeant Gallagher I was telling you about, he used to come down and try and catch us all the time, but he never caught us.
So going back to the early stages when you're in your DAT, besides the driving, did you do any sort of work in the engineering sort of side of things?
No, mate. My job was just at that stage of drive. I did the water tanker a few times. That's how I got to see my brother. I got on the water tanker and went to different areas, and he was down at 2 Battalion. So I called in there and seen him, sat around and talked to him. And
how good was that, seeing your brother?
oh, it was great. Yeah.
So were you able to glean any sort of insight of what it would be like before you got there, or from your brother? Or?
Well, Barry had gone over. Barry was over there first. He was the first one to go over, and no, he didn't talk about it much because he was injured in Borneo, and then he came home, and then he went, and he's married, of course, and then he went to Vietnam, and then he got injured again. He got medevaced out, and he was married, so he didn't really come home that much. And he didn't talk much. He wasn't well, so he didn't talk. You know, didn't say much. And as I said, Trevor didn't say much, so I didn't really, and there wasn't many engineers who were Vietnam vets to really talk to. It was sort of starting to get bigger, and as I said, we didn't have a real lot of engineers that were going compared to other, like the infantry, you know.
So what was involved in building that new big bunker?
Well, when I got there, was sort of the hole had been dug, and the framework had been put up, and the sandbags had been built on the side. It's sort of you had to go in through a back door down underground, and then you had your as you went through, all the beds of sort of bunks built in on the right. It was quite a good design. It was built by engineers, I suppose. It was with timber and everything. Then you went up in the front, then up the stairs and into your platform where you could see out. And you had about 12 inches, I suppose. That's where you look through with the machine gun, and that was all sandbagged. Then we pushed had all 44-gallon drums in front, full of sandbags, and that was all filled up. It was a big bunned up, and a few sandbags, full on top or something. And he just sat in there and looked out. It was pretty good, really. I mean, I would have lived there better than my tent.
Well, when you were off, actually being on machine gun picket and then sleeping in the bunker, how comfortable was that?
Well, it was hot, you know, like it wasn't real comfortable. You'd sort of, you know, you normally what happens is you're sitting up on the gun and next minute you're starting to fall asleep and think, geez, it's only 5 minutes and I got an hour and a half to go. You start falling asleep, and then, you know, but then when you went down to sleep, by the time you got down there, you're dirty and you're hot, and, you know, sweaty, and you'd doze off for a while, but you never really sleep that well. You know, you just sort of doze off, and even at the bush, you know, when they harboured up at night time, you didn't really sleep properly. You sort of felt like a sleep, but it wasn't really. But,
so after you did your 2 hours, you get 6 hours of doze, and then you do another 2 hours?
But well, it depends. If you started first, I think you did the last couple of hours or something like that. But normally, what happens is you went straight to work after that. Like there's no day off. You did your night picket, and then you went out and did normally what you do during the day. I just can't remember. It might have been 4 hours. I know it was I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a fair while. You know, it might have been 2 hours when you're out the bush, and 4 hours in there. But yeah, but as I said, you just did your picket, got up the next morning, had your breakfast, because the daytime coming, there's no one going to sneak in, I reckon. So you'd go out and get on and do your job and come back.
So was there ever any incidents at night time?
Oh, sometimes, like there was always traces flying around. Like I mean, you're sitting there, there's always traces flying from different places, and like the Arvin were sort of had little forts out. They used to shoot at anything, you know. They'd just start banging off at night time. That's how they used to clear the area. Every trace. It looked quite nice, really, you know. And then and the artillery was always firing. I mean, all the time, constantly, the artillery would be firing. You'd hear them going over the top of you, and you hear them boom, and you hear them go over. And as long as they're going out, it was all right.
Was that? Do you know whether that was the Aussie guys or?
Yeah, Australians. Yeah, Australian. We had the artillery just up from us, and they used to fire missions all the time. Could be any hour of the night, day, or anything. The infantry, they'd have certain areas that they'd be firing, like even around our area, they'd be firing on it. Someone, I don't know, they'd plotted it and they'd say, okay, they might use this tonight, so we'll just fire every couple of hours onto that spot and then shift to another spot. But then the infantry might call in, you know, they want some fire support or something like that, so they'd fire it. Or the Americans or whoever was Arvin might call in for an Arvin thing. They've got someone on our wire or something like that, so they used to just give them a bit of fire support. But the Arvin sort of nearly always, half the time weren't there at their little forts anyway. They went home, so they didn't do their job real well. But no, it was pretty noisy. I mean, you got used to it. At first it was, oh shit, what's that? You know, all the time. But then it was just like, no, it was nothing. It was just like the mole starting up across the road, and just went about what you were doing, you know. And helicopters all the time. I mean, there's just all day helicopters in and out, flying all over the place, and in their slicks, like in their 6-pack, you know, 6 of them or whatever together, and picking up infantry, taking them out. So it was pretty noisy. The only time, really at night time, you heard them was if there was a medevac coming in or something like that. But they landed over, like they had a RAP further over from us, and they normally landed there. But if they were really bad, they flew them down to Vung Tau. First they used to fly them to American hospital, but then they flew them down to Vung Tau, and that's where they did all the work on them down there.
The Caribou you came over, was that a RAF one as well?
Yeah, they're both RAF ones. Yeah, I think the only other one I flew in was a Herc, baby Herc, and that was American, I think. Yeah.
And the Caribou, when it came over, was it bringing anything else, or was it just?
Oh no, well, when I went over to Vietnam.
Oh, from Tansen Hut to Nui Dat.
I think it just had blokes in it, just we all just crowded in with our gear, you know, just everything thrown in the middle, and we were still sitting there going, oh, yeah, looking out the window. Yeah.
What was the drive like from there down to Vung Tau?
It was about 20-something kilometres, I think, down there, or miles, I can't remember now. But no, it was like when you first left Nui Dat, there was a little village, I can't think of it now, just out of Nui Dat, which is hostile to us. And I think just before I went over there, my brother's battalion had a search and destroy, not a search and destroy, but a search of the village, and one of the infantry blokes got killed. He opened up a bunker and someone shot him, but then I think they killed about 6 people in that. They got about 6 dogs out of that. But we used to have to drive through, and it wasn't they weren't friendly to us at all. You know, you couldn't trust them. I mean, you know, you'd look at the little kids, they might have a grenade or something. So what they did, they put a ring road in around that place, and later on, and then we. But it was you went through all like you started off and you went through like the farmlands, rice paddies and all that sort of stuff, and you went down. Then you come in near the river, and then you went through like just like little towns. And when you got closer to Vung Tau, there was I suppose they would have been like navy bases, but you couldn't sort of see in. But there was navy bases and army bases, and as you got closer to Vung Tau, it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and people everywhere, people walking the street, people riding bikes, and you know, it was and little. You know, little bikes with the backs on, with people sitting here and going along at 100 miles an hour. Yeah, things like that, yeah.
And what did you think, being a young bloke?
Oh, it was a bit hard to get used to the ladies just rolling up the side of their trousers and doing a bit having a wee on the ground. I mean, you think, what the hell's going on here? This is, you know, but they all did it. So I mean, and everyone wore black pajamas, and the enemy was supposed to wear them, and it was things like that. It was quite. And some of their attitude, some were like, I mean, some were nice to you, like, but then again, they might have wanted something, you know. But there's a lot of, I reckon there's a lot of people there that really wanted us there, but they couldn't say too much, you know. They're between the devil and the deep blue sea. I mean, if you, especially if you lived in a small area and in a country, in a little village, and you befriended us, well, we're not there during the night time. The other guys come in at night time, and then they'll able to cut your head off or something, you know. I think a couple of village chiefs got their head cut off just north of us for that same reason, but they replaced them pretty quick. Someone else stepped into the place, and I mean, I don't know if I would, but someone did, you know. But there's things like that happen all the time. I mean, they'd kill teachers, and you know, when you look back and you think, you felt sorry for them, because we got cranky if we knew the Viet Cong were there. And then the Viet Cong got cranky when they knew we were there, so they didn't really have a good life. You know, they were pretty hard done by, I think. But most of the people in Vung Tau were sort of after money. You know, they wanted the MPC, which is the American currency, not their money, because their money can be turned worthless any day, because they just changed the colour, and it was not. You know, we could cash it in and get the MPC, but they couldn't. You know. So they used to try and I used to do it. It was against the rules to give them MPC, because they said, oh, they can go out and buy weapons then, but bugger it, it's just money, they can have it, I don't care, you know. But you're supposed to change it into their money and then hand it out and give the MPC back. But no, we used to just spend it wherever we wanted to. Yeah. But Vung Tau was a nice place. I mean, there's some places there, it's all old French, like, you know, like old buildings and everything, nice streets and everything. Then other places was pretty bad, pretty smelly, and because on the way down you went down through this little paddy fields and all that sort of stuff, and I think the Warburton Mountains, they were on your right hand side, and you could look down to the left was the Long Highs, which we had a lot of trouble with, and then you went to Berea, went through Berea, which was like a big country town, had a picture theatre and a big tower in there, and that's where that Tet offensive, they had a few people took over that, and they had to blow the picture theatre up and a few other things, and but you'd go through there, and then you drive off down a bit further, and that's when you get into start building up a bit. And there's always trucks. I mean, the road was that busy. I mean, there's trucks screaming up the roads. I mean, when I drove down, we used to go down with the sergeant, myself, and maybe someone else, maybe two sergeants, and we'd just have our rifles in the car, and off we'd go, and all these trucks would come hurtling up the other way. It's not nice to chuckle at the transport, but they used to do missions. They used to call them missions, and they have about 15 to 20 trucks, all blokes with flak jackets on, screaming up the highway, and we go, oh. You just put a bit of shit on them. And in the end, some of the our vehicles had a machine gun on it. We used to get sniped at, but pretty far away, But it was, I didn't think about it. And then they had out at the Horseshoe, they had, I think it was 2 Battalion, one of the companies had one of their vehicles ambushed one day, and there was 2 Australians killed, I think, and the Vietnamese in the back were badly wounded. Then things changed a bit from there. We didn't have doors in our vehicles.
So that were Land Rovers?
Land Rovers, yeah. There's a photo in my book there of one that got knocked around pretty bad, where the 2 blokes were killed in it. What they did, they went out in the two Land Rovers, and they were driving down the road near the Horseshoe, and there was these 2 ox carts, and one blocked the second vehicle, and the other vehicle kept on going, and they set a claymore mine off on them and machine gunned them, killed the 2 Australians, and put a lot of holes in the vehicle. And the bloke, I think the Nogs lived, the Vietnamese lived. One got shot in the bum and a few other places, and by the time the second vehicle got there, it was all over. So then I think they had doors on their vehicles. That's when the doors all came off. We didn't have covers on the doors, so you could dismount real quick. And it was nothing. Everything, all trucks were like that. Even the trucks were like that. No doors on them. I can't remember the doors on the trucks. I can't remember. But I know the Land Rovers had nothing on them. And that was about that.
Did you, despite the fact that the doors were off so you could dismount quick, did you feel more protected having a door there?
No, not really. No, once you see a bullet gone through metal, well, it's not going to stop anything. It's not even going to ricochet off. It's just going to go straight through it. And I'd rather get out quick than be sitting somewhere and not being able to get the door open and they're pinging at you. You're better off get out. You might find a ditch somewhere you can jump into. No, I didn't mind the doors being off. I preferred that. Yeah.
So what could you get up to once you got down to Vung Tau?
Oh, they had. If you went down there on leave, sometimes you had once a month. Our unit used to try and go down there. Whoever was in there would go down for a barbecue go down Saturday, stay Saturday night, and come home Sunday. And they had a barbecue and had a swim at the beach or something. But most times everyone couldn't go, and half the time they didn't go. But no, it was quite good. They had they had Babco Club right on the beach, and you can get hamburgers and you can get all that some beers and chips and everything like that. Then you just went into into Vung Tau itself, and they had all the bars, and they had like bars out in the open where you can sit around the table and have drinks and things, and just walk through and look at the places. But I didn't really sort of get into that much. I went in on I had R&C there, but the first one lasted a couple of days, and they called us back. I think the Tet Offensive was coming. Well, it might have been just after. I don't know whether it was just before or just after the Tet Offensive, but we got called back early, and then after that I didn't really get down there because I was out the bush after a while. I didn't get down there that many times. Like when we drove down, you drive down and you stay there and you drive back that day. And when I was down with the sergeant, it was more or less going to a unit. It wasn't going down into Vung Tau to get on the beer. They went down there to see someone to get something, and so you just went in there and sat in and had a beer or something while you're waiting for them to do what they had to do.
Did you ever have to drive the trucks down there as well, or was it just the Land Rover?
I don't think. No, I didn't drive a truck down. Never drove a truck down. My mates drove them up from Vung Tau a couple of times. But I had a mate down there in Vung Tau, so I went and visited him in his in their quarters down there. But I didn't like Vung Tau because it's too much sand. It was a beach, and I don't like beaches. Well, not that I don't like beaches. Sand in your hair is no good, eh? But no, it was just too hot. It was. It just wasn't a place I liked. In the town was all right, but where they were right on the beach, and it was sort of You know, I don't like it.
And what were the roads like? Were they just dirt?
No, they had bitumen roads, but in the that's on the way down there, and they had bitumen roads, and some were dirt, sand, bitumen. I think some were a bit of bitumen, but they used to have Vietnamese working for them in the army unit there. And Nui Dat, we wouldn't let any Vietnamese in there. Anyone, even only the trackers or the interpreters, they were allowed to come in. I think, but only after it took a long time to get sort of used to them, like letting them in. But they always had Vietnamese down there doing the clerical work and that, and a bit of maintenance.
That's at the Australian base at Vung Tau.
Yeah, they always had them around the place. Yeah, which is Americans always did too. The Americans couldn't survive without them. But Nui Dat, no one there.
And Nui Dat too, was that like really, as opposed to a lot of the American bases and that where they cleared all the vegetation, was Nui Dat more in amongst the trees? Or?
Yeah. It was in amongst the battalions were in amongst the rubber plantations, and so were we. It was nearly all rubber plantations. We had Nui Dat Hill, which was forested a bit, but then they had the quarry there that cleaned out around the bottom of it. SAFs were on the top, so they cleaned it out. Then they built a big helipad down below it, besides Luscombe Field, which they had, but they built a big helipad. And it's, like it had roads all through it, but they're all dirt. It was neat. It was quite neat. But you're under these rubber trees. And they used to fall over sometimes because they died.
Was there anything about Vietnam that reminded you of Australia at all?
No, not really. No, nothing about Vietnam reminded me of Australia. No. Oh, VB, I suppose. And Forex, but I didn't like Forex in the tins. They thought they used to taste funny. But yeah, that's about all that reminded me of Australia. And the slouch hat.
Right, so you're in Nui Dat and you're mostly driving
At the time,
and you're getting a bit jack of that. So what do you do then?
Well, as I said, I put in a transfer to the infantry, and that was approved, but I didn't know about it at the time. And then while I was there, while I was in 21 support troop, this CMF sergeant came over, Sergeant Gallagher, but I used to call him Sergeant Gallagher, and he was. When I was in the pickets and that in the bunkers, he used to try and sneak up. He used to come around with helmet on, and he used to have all his bandolier of grenades and things on him, and he'd sneak up and try to catch us sleeping and all that. And we used to play little tricks on him, like we used to hear him come along the side, so I'd swing the machine gun around so it's pointing at the edge, and when he'd get there, I'd cock it and scare the living hell out of him. And but I got on real well with him. I talked to him, and I think he had about 7 kids. Anyway, he was trying to get out in the field too. And not that the other sergeants didn't like him. I think it was just that he was CMF and they were regular, and they didn't class CMF to be up to their standard, which I suppose they wouldn't have been. And I think he felt sort of a bit out, and he's trying to prove that he was as good as they were. And anyway, I remember one day we were there, and I was at my tent, and the truck come past, and all the 2 troop were he was in 2 troop, and we're all sitting on the truck, and as he went past, he was sitting on the back of the truck with his legs dangling. He's only a short guy, and he's saying out, I can't remember exactly what it is, or saying out something like, "Stephen, I beat you," and carrying on. And anyway, then he went out, and that same day I got the message back that he was killed the same day. So he went down a tunnel and he got shot. I believe, I don't know how true the story was, but he got shot in the front and in the back. So he was hit by Viet Cong, and I suppose, I don't know whether Australians fired too, and he got hit, but he died anyway. So, but that was sort of sad. You sort of get to know him, and then he's just not there anymore. But then then we had our SSM, which was. Corporal Hutchison. They went out one day, and I used to drive the SSM. Sometimes we went down to Vung Tau, but he was only he was a staff sergeant, but they made him acting SSM, and they went out one day to clear a mined. I think it was a mined bridge. Anyway, they'd gone by themselves, and we got a message back that they were both killed. So That was the hard part because they just sort of disappeared. I'd never see them again, you know, they just sort of disappeared. And then not long after that, after Sergeant, well, they died before Sergeant Gallagher did, but when Sergeant Gallagher got killed would have been about a week after he was killed, I was sent into, I was put into one troop, and Nico, I can't think of his last name, but he was a section corporal, and went over there and I arrived in there, I had all my equipment, they said get your gear ready, and anyway they had an O group, they had a barbecue and a bit of an O group that night, and you know, the lieutenant was there, and Nico was, the lieutenant had his talk about whatever he was talking about, then Nico, he said, you have a talk, tell them what you think, and he said, oh yeah, he said, when they were going out to the minefield, he said, when you're out there, he said, don't walk on the tank tracks, because they lifted the middle piece up the high piece and put the booby trap, the M16s under them. Anyway, and then they said to me, well, Steve, I was supposed to go out with them, but they said you won't be going until the next day. So I said, all right. So I went and got my gear, and anyway, they went out the next morning, and I think about around 12 or whatever it was, Nico stepped on a mine. Well, what happened was they found a booby, they had a grenade on the wire, and they all went down there and they were checking it out, and the APCs sort of positioned themselves around them, and they had the Kiwis with them, the Kiwi infantry, and they were with them, and I think what happened was Nico went down, and with his mine detector and his helmet on, and his mate, I can't think who he was, but he was with him too. They were pretty close, and they fixed the grenade up, and then Nico turned around. Well, Nico, his mate turned around and walked up the track, and so Nico just put his mine detector down, had his helmet off and put it down, and followed him up the track. The bloke in front stepped over 3, and Nico stepped on the second one, and it killed him, and it wounded. I killed him, and the Kiwi machine gunner got hit in the head, and he died, and I think about 5 others got wounded, so pretty badly wounded. So.
How did that make you feel, knowing that you were originally going to be out there with them?
Yeah, well, I felt pretty bad, you know, because you sort of go in there and you think, you know, what could have been me, you know, but it's not that. It's just that it's so quick. Like, I mean, it's not. It happens, and then they're just not there anymore. They're just there's no. You don't see them buried or anything. It's just they just don't come back, which is pretty hard, you know. Then you have. You know, like then what happened? Then they sent me out the next day. I was sent out to the Long Highs to another section, and I remember going out there because they gave me an envelope because Nico was going home. He was being sent home, and the rest of the blokes sort of come over with him, and they were going home around the same time. And I think Nico was getting engaged when he got home or something, or married. I'm not too sure. So when I went out with the paperwork, and they wrote on the back, Nico dead, and I can't think it was wounded. And so I had to take that information out. It made me feel pretty bad because I didn't know really I knew the blokes in the section by saying hello to them, but I'd never, you know, when you're not working with them, they're sort of mates, they're cliques. But yeah, it was quite upsetting. But then before I went out there, it's funny because on the day I had to go out, they sent me down to 2 Battalion. It was a little, I can't think of the helipad they had. They got their own helipad where they used to bring the casualties back on that. And my mate drove me down, and I'd never been sort of really in a helicopter before. You know, I didn't know. They just said go down to this helipad and wait there and jump on this helicopter and fly somewhere. And I thought, oh shit, that sort of sounds all right. Well, you know, so I went down anyway. My mate drove me down, and we went into 2 Battalion, and we went into C Company, and my brother's company, the C Company, they were back. So he drove up near the mess and got out, and I thought I'd go and see if Trevor's here, you know. So I went up, and Trevor's in there having a beer, and my mate went up with me, and g'day mate, I'm going out, you know, and all this sort of stuff. And he said, oh well, I'll buy you a beer. So he had me a beer before I went out, which is, I didn't think about it much then, but and my mate had a beer, And anyway, we had the beer and we talked, and he just said, "Oh well, keep your head down, your ass up, you'll be right." And he said, "Just all you do is follow that track down there." He said, "You see the helipad when you get down there, and you'll be right." I thought he'd come down with me, but he didn't. Too busy having a beer. And so anyway, I wandered off down the back track there. I remember, and my mate left. He already stayed there at the boozer. And so I went back, and I got to this helipad, and I'm stood there, and there was no one there. And I thought, well, I wonder how they know how to pick me up, you know? Like, I don't know how to talk to a helicopter. Anyway, there was a bit of equipment sitting there, like ammunition. And anyway, this helicopter come in, it come and landed, and the gunner on the door sort of acknowledged and hopped out. And they started to load the equipment on, and I gave him a bit of a hand. He said, "Hop in," and like just told me to get in. So I hopped in, and I was the only one in there with the ammo and the crew, and off we went, straight up, flying along. And I thought, no, I hope they know where they're taking me, because I don't know where I'm going, you know. And I couldn't understand how the hell they knew about just me, picked me up, you know. And I was flying along, and I remember we're going down towards the long high mountains, and the gunner pointed out, and he's pointed down at something, and I'm trying to look down. What the hell is he pointing? I couldn't see what he's pointing at. It must be pointing where the base was, and I'm sort of looking, thinking, I can't see bloody it. But I know, yeah, okay, right, I can see it. Anyway, so we landed there, and that's when I had to get out and hand the paperwork over to the section commander, and that was my first operation with one troop. I'd been out the bush before with 21 support on Operation Santa Fe, doing a water point. That was another type of thing, you know. Yeah, it was a little bit different to that, because we went out by Chinook, and we had to take the Land Rover and the water pump and a big bladder, and that was funny because we got out there and there was 4 of us. And I'd never used the pump before, supposed to have been an engineer. Anyway, I got photos of it. We landed there, and we're right beside the helipad, see, and the artillery was on our right. And so we landed there and got our Land Rover off and everything. I was driving it, and we went down there. There's a big hole beside the thing. It was just a big square hole like our room here, maybe a bit bigger. And we went down and see the boss. He said, "Oh yeah, well that's where you know, put your gear in. That's where you can stay in that hole there. That's if you find that. Oh, with that, that'll do us good, you know." And he said, "Well, where do you want the water point?" He said, "Well, down there, right down there, the creek down there." And we must have been very naive, because we, oh, okay. So we got on the Land Rover, and off we drove down to this creek, and got out and didn't check anything. We just got out and started unloading all the gear and put the pump out and got the bladder set up and everything, and we got the pump going and put the chlorine in it and pumped the water into this big bladder sort of thing. And next minute these APCs come down and, "What are you doing?" You know, "Well, we're filling up the bladder here, you know." "Oh, this is Indian country out here." "Oh, yeah." Anyway, we found all these, well, they'd found them before us, but there's all these holes, bunkers, tunnels uncovered, and that I took a couple of photos of them. And anyway, so we filled this bladder up, and we went back and built our little cubby house in the hole. And I think, I don't know, we mightn't have built the thing on that day, but we built our cubby house. Anyway, the next day, I think when we went out and we did this water thing again, when we were away, a helicopter flew down around over it and must have hovered and blew. When we come back, got a photo, all the top was blown off, our beds are blown out, and our helmets, everything was blown. I think they did it on purpose, because it looked like a bloody big humpy. It was a funny little thing. Anyway, we put this, after we did the water point one night, we came back and we left it out there. We didn't know, we just built it and put the water in it and come back. We thought they were going to use it. We were told they were going to use it, and we're standing up at our thing, and all these APCs were down the bottom, and they had the big mortars in the back, and next minute they're firing the mortars, and oh, geez, look at that, that's interesting. And we wandered down, and we're standing there watching them fire these mortars out. Oh shit, they just landed down there near the creek. Oh, that's where our water point is. And they blew our water point up. So they did it twice. The next day we fixed it up, and they did it again, so then we just didn't bother fixing it up, and we packed up, and we stayed out there for 2 weeks, just sitting around. But that was the first time I went out the bush.
Were they just using it as target practice, or were they actual enemy down there?
I don't know. They just fired on it, and I got photos of the mortar rounds. You know, it was deflated, and the mortar rounds in the ground. My mate's holding the hose, all blown. But no one sort of we didn't know. I suppose it's a bit naive. We should have realised it was, but they didn't tell us. They didn't really need our water. That was the worst part, because they had these big helicopters flying in all these water cans. And we thought, well, Yeah, I think they might have used ours once. I think they put some showers or something on it, but I just can't remember that. But I thought, well, why'd they bring us out? So we just sat around and watched American guns, and they had big mobile guns there, big like tanks, but they're not tanks, they're cannons, and we watched them, and we just had a good time. But where the artillery was, the Nogs crept through the wire one night, and they had their claymores out, and they picked up a claymore and brought it back and stuck it in the front of the opening of one of the pits. And when the guns fired that night for their rounds, they just set the thing off and killed, I think, two Australians in there. And I met one of my mates from the fire brigade later on. He was on picket that night over there. He was in the artillery. He said, I must have been asleep. But you know, but they got through there. But that was the first time I went out with anyone. And then, as I said, when I went into one troop, I went out to the Long Highs as my first one out there.
So what happened now that you're out in the field?
Yeah, well, that time there, we I learned a couple of good lessons. We had our water bottles. We normally had a drinking mug attached to the bottom of them, but I'd lost mine, so I wasn't drinking any tea or anything hot. I was just drinking water. And I remember we went out. We had to go out with infantry and we do a patrol. And we went out with a platoon, and I got sick. I got bad headaches and everything, and we're going through the jungle. It was hot, and I was going through, and that was all real low stuff. Anyway, they harboured up a bit, and they said to the they sent a section out, and they'd sent two of us engineers with them, and I was vomiting, and I just dragged my rifle. If someone could have come over and blew my head off, I wouldn't care less. Anyway, we finally got back. You know, it seemed like ages, but we weren't gone that long, and we got back to where we were, and the officer came up to me and he said, "Oh look," he said, "if you're not better by tomorrow, we'll have to chop you out." And I said, "No, I didn't care." Anyway, the medic came up and he made me a big brew of coffee, black coffee. And I never drank it before anyway, so I drank about half of it, a bit more than half of it, and then I said, "I can't drink any more," so everyone else shared it. Then they just said, "Go to sleep," because night time I went to sleep and then woke up the next morning and I was as bright as a button. You know, it was good. And about a month or so later than that, I got this craving for coffee, you know, and that's when I started drinking coffee, you know. So yeah, that was that experience. But that wasn't a real good one, not at first, you know. But then you just sort of get into the rigmarole of just walking along and patrolling.
Was that your first patrol out in the?
That was my first
Beans?
patrol, yeah.
So what was that like, nerve wise?
Well, as I said, that first day there, I didn't really care. They could have attacked us, and I would have just said, "Yeah, shoot me." I didn't worry about it. I was pretty crook, but that sort of got, as the day went on, I got worse, you know. But what I found, it was sort of. Well, at first you sort of walk out there and your sort of eyeballs are going around and you're looking and you're walking through and all this sort of stuff. But after a while you tend to get, walk along and have a look, you know, and no, it's all right, no one over there, no one over there. Because you only walk so far, then you stop, because the forward scout, he's going through and he's pacing, he's counting his paces. And then he'll only go so far, then he'll stop and then he'll listen and look, and then he'll move forward a bit further. And by the time everyone does that, and you've got, you know, say a platoon, well, I'm not a platoon now, bloody 100 and something blokes, depends if they're full strength or what. And my company's 100 and something, I think, 150, I think. But anyway, platoon's a bit smaller. But you're walking through and you're sort of stopping, and then you just stand there and you lean up against the tree and you're just looking and listening to what's going on. And a lot of times you're looking down and see that there's nothing there. But sometimes you get tired and you just sort of, it's just boring. You're just walking and walking and walking. You're thinking, I hope something happens shortly, you know, because I'll fall asleep walking, you know. And then you got all your weight on your back, your pack, and you're carrying. We used to carry. I used to carry my pack, 4 water bottles on my belt. I think it was 3 or 4 on my belt. 2 old British pouches with 12 magazines. Because for the Armalite you can get more, only smaller rounds. I had them in there. I carried about 7 pounds of plastic explosives in my bag, some det cord, and a bandolier of 200 rounds. And then, you know, that's what you carried. So you just wandered along with that. And then you sort of have to stop, and then they'd say 5 minutes for a brew up, you know, or smoke out, and just break for 5 minutes. And you just get down and you're getting your brew and next one, let's move. To it out. You learn after a while. It wasn't really a cup of tea time. And yeah, so, but we had the plastic explosive, so we could break a bit of that off. And you put that under your cup and put your water and that in it and just lit it and seconds it's boiled, you know. And the infantry only had their hexamine, you know. So we used to swap the explosives for their food or something, you know, something they liked. So you know, you might like some fruit, so you just give them a bit of that, and they give you a bit of their fruit. Because if you wanted stuff, they'd fly it into you. You've got a big bunker system, which they did on other occasions, you know.
What about before you left, but on that patrol, were you anxious or excited, or?
Oh, I was excited, but I mean, it wasn't that. I think the worst thing was going there and having to tell people that one of their mates was dead, you know. And quite obviously they weren't happy. They sort of were down, and because they all knew they were going home shortly, and he's going home, but before them, but not the way that he wanted to go home. And I think, you know, from what I can remember of it, I sort of felt pretty bad about that, sort of as if you're stepping in and type of thing, and you didn't know them that well, you know, like you only said hello to them occasionally, you might have waved to them going past because you were in a different troop, and I think that was a bit hard, and you know, well, they treated me pretty well from what I can remember. They try to tell me what to do and look after me, but it's just you're nervous. I mean, I don't really know whether you're scared or anything. I think it's because you're too stupid to be scared when you're that young. You sort of think, oh, this is exciting. I'll get out to shoot my rifle, you know. And then after a while, you tend to, as time gets on, you start realising what can happen to you, you know, especially when you have like your first contact or something, and then you think, shit, that could be me, you know. That's sort of another thing that makes you feel bad sometimes. You know, if someone gets hit, you think, oh, well, that could have been me. I'm glad it wasn't me. Glad it was him. And you don't really mean it in that way, but it's just something, how you feel, you know, because you don't want to die. But, you know, like that went on, and we just finished that operation, and I think that was one where we were out there, and the long highs, if you know anything about them, was where the bad guys lived. Well, they're supposed to be the bad guys, the enemy. They lived up there, and it was very, after we left, well no, just before I went in out, the troop went up there and they had to try to go in there, but it was full of mines. All our mines that we'd laid in the minefield, they'd flogged them and put them up there. And because the Arvin was supposed to protect the minefield, but they used to go home every night, and these people used to get in and rob the minefield. And we don't really know how many mines were pinched, but there was a lot pinched. But anyway, we were sitting there, and I think this was that first time. I don't know if it was that time or another time I went out there, but we were out there. We had the Centurion tanks out with us, so it must have been a bit later. No, this must have been a bit later on, because we had the Centurion tanks with us, and I was on APCs at this time. That's right, and we were all sitting, because land clearing, they cleaned up all around these mountains, made these big open areas so that people could see any footprints in the dust. That's what I think it was for, and any marks in the mud when it rained, and it was a big open area right around the whole place, and all the bush, like they do out Western Queensland. And this night we were sitting out there, and this little light used to come along this track up on the mountain, every night, you know, it'd come along, and then it'd go into this cave right in front of us, you know, up a fair way. And we watched it and watched it. Anyway, one night the boss said, we're going to hit it tonight with everything we got, you know, that Centurion tanks and APCs and everything. And this little light come wandering along, went into this cave, and boom, everyone fired on it. Mate, they blew the living Christ out of that cave, out of the mountain anyway, whatever it was. And everyone was sitting there, went real quiet and black, and next minute the lantern started up again. Everyone went, hey, good shot. Yeah, that was quite funny. Quite obviously they were still up there. And, yeah, it was a rocky mountain too. They would have been walking behind rocks and things, so it'd be pretty hard to hit them. But yeah, I heard, I don't know how true it was, they said some South Vietnamese Rangers and one of the Australian advisors did go up there one time to see what it was, but I can't remember if that was true or not. But yeah, so that was sort of funny, that was, yeah.
So when you're in the patrol, going with the infantry guys, you're essentially an infantryman while you're in the patrol.
But we're more or less looked after. Like, they still have their sections, and we're just, how it works normally is, say it was a platoon, say it was a company, and you had 3 platoons and a headquarters. Well, what normally happens is we have 7 engineers. You have a corporal and 6 other members. You have 3 number 1s and 3 number 2s. And then what happens is the corporal would go to headquarters, and then the other 3 would split up into the platoons, and you just work with them. And what happens is you just choose where you want to walk, basically, and you can either be at the front, back, middle, wherever you want. And that's how we normally work. We just normally thought, oh, we'll walk in the middle this time, or we'll go a little bit to the back. And we just used to wander along with them. You know, if we got into contact, quite obviously you have to shoot too, the same as everyone else, but they know their job better than you do because they work with each other all the time. You know, even if there's only 6 of them, they still know what the 6 of them have to do. You know, you just help them, or just lay there and just don't do anything if you don't want to. But if someone's attacking you, quite obviously you try to shoot back.
So you were reasonably happy at that stage in that you'd tried to get into infantry and were keen to get into it, so...
Yeah, I was happy then when I was in the field troop, yeah. But I wasn't real confident with myself because I didn't really like explosives that much. I didn't like tunnels and that too much. I just wanted to just do a basic job. I didn't want to do all that other stuff, you know. But I still went along and did it. I did it, but I never thought I was a real good soldier. I just thought I was just an average soldier, and but no one really showed me anything because they must have thought I knew how to do it. So I just went along and just did the basic stuff, you know. And I don't think I wasn't a bad soldier. But matter of fact, I met one of my sergeants later from there, and he said that he reckons I was a good soldier. So I don't know.
And going back to sort of before these couple of guys, you know, got killed, how would you prepared yourself for, you know, knowing that sooner or later blokes that you knew were going to probably get it?
Well, I don't really think you sort of prepare yourself for it. You don't really think it's going to happen, you know. It's happening over there, you sort of think. It's like everything. You think it's going to happen to someone else, or it's happening over there, and it's not going to happen to your blokes, you know. And then it starts happening. You know, we lost a few engineers at that time. We started losing them, then stepping on mines and things like that. And I don't know, because the way it is, when they die, there's no mourning thing for them. I mean, you have a few beers and, you know, but there's no real chance to sort of sit around and mourn it. You go straight out the bush, or you're out the bush or something like that, and you hear about it. Well, can't do anything about it. You just got to keep doing what you have to do. I think that was the hard part, you know. Yeah, pretty hard like that. And I never really, even with my brother, I never sort of worried when he was there. I don't know whether they worried when I was there, but you know, the only thing with my family, having 4 brothers in the army, and I always expected one of us to get it, you know. I really did. I thought, well, and then when I thought, gee, I'm the last one, I don't want it. I don't like the odds. But no, it worked out. We all got, well, Lionel didn't get to Vietnam. He only went Malaya and Borneo, and then he became an instructor. So, and before he could get to Vietnam, my other brother died, so I wouldn't let him go. So I suppose if we fought it, they would have let us go, but they just held off us a bit because there was 4 of us in the army. So,
and the infantry company that you were operating with, where was their sort of main area of operations?
Like were they stationed at Nui Dat? Well, they were down 2 Battalion. Well, I worked with 2 Battalion for a little bit, not much, just a couple of times because they were getting ready. They were coming home, type of thing. My main battalion was 4, but they were just down. Just down the road from us, sort of thing. They had their own battalion area. Each battalion had their own area. Each unit had their own area. Like some units weren't on the perimeter, some were inside, but mainly the big units like one Field Squadron, the artillery, APCs, and the infantry were right on the perimeter, because engineers are a sort of a form of infantry too, you know. So we were on the perimeter there, but they were all around the place. They were down. Some of them down at Luscombe Field, on the other side of Luscombe Field, and then later on, when 3 Battalion come, they moved further out to, I don't know which way it would be, but further out from us. We built their area for them.
So what happened when that lot went back to Australia? What did you do then?
Well, when that happened, we'd moved from I was still working with 2 Battalion, and then we had the Tet Offensive, and that all went through, and everyone was doing that a little bit. And then when that finished, they sent 1 Battalion, I think it was 7, and another battalion up to near Saigon, and there's different areas of operation up there. So then they sent us, they sent them up there, and one night they just said, get all our gear ready, we're going out there the next day. So they sent the whole of 1 troop and 2 troop, I think, and that was a Battle of Coral, and we went out, and we went out by truck because we stayed at a big arm. I don't know if it was Bearcat or something like that. We stayed at this army barracks, one like big American place, and then the next day we went further out by trucks to where Coral was. It wasn't really set up because they just got attacked the night before, and then we moved in, and then they attacked us again. I think the 13th. I think they attacked us. We were there on the 13th or the 15th. They attacked us again, and they sort of overran part of the area. Fired a lot of rockets and mortars at us.
Can you tell us your experience of that?
Well, I didn't really know it was happening at first because I'd done with picket. I was in a gun pit, and I just I was sort of laying in there, and someone grabbed me by the foot and just started to drag me out, and they said, we're being mortared, and well, I got in the pit and they said they're walking them in, and all we had was one little strand of barbed wire at the front. We didn't think we were ever going to get attacked type of thing. We thought it was a fluke, the first one. Anyway, so I got in the pit because we had no overhead cover. We just had a hole dug in the ground with three holes dug backwards for sleeping. And I jumped in the pit, and we were sitting there, and they said they're walking them in. There was 4 of us in the pit at that stage. There was an extra man because he was doing a picket in there. And I just sat down in there, and you could hear them walk the rounds up both sides of the wire. Then they turned in front of our pit, and they started coming towards us. And so we all just ducked down lower. Then they sort of stopped about a couple of metres in front of our pit. And then they went over behind us, hit the pit behind us, direct hit on that one. But they just got out. It was one of the bloke's beds. He just got out into the slit trench, and then the big tree to our right got plastered, and then they just walked him straight from there, straight back into the centre of the fire support base Coral, where the big aerial, they were aiming for a big aerial in there, I think. I think they were lined up on that, and they just kept mortaring us, and went on all night. And then the helicopters come in, the gunships come in, and they started blasting at people, and people shooting up at things, and I don't think you really. Well, you didn't sort of have time to get... Well, I did when I got down, and they said they were walking them in because artillery and that, you don't know, you can't see a bloody thing. And you could hear when they dropped them in the cylinders, like pump from way out there, but you couldn't hear anything else until it crumped on the ground, and you could hear yours go pump, go out, you could hear all that. There was all that going on. And then one of our officers was coming around talking to us, and things like that. The only thing we worried about at the time, we only had 500 rounds for our M60 machine gun, which wouldn't have lasted long, and we had no grenades. We kept on asking for grenades in case we got assaulted, because we only had one strand of, like one little coil of barbed wire, you could walk your dog through it, and we just weren't prepared for it. We just didn't think it was going to happen. We just, and it was just so quick, and there was a few killed that night. And then the next day we had to get up. We got up and fixed our bunkers up a little bit better and put some head cover over it, and got out some more barbed wire and spread that around. And then they, a few nights later, they came back again and did it again. Yeah, so they knew where we were, and like you could see them. The blokes just went out not far from the camp, and you could see them a few hundred metres away walking through the bush or doing things. I was out the front when a few days later, I was doing a picket out there, right out the front, and while I was doing the barbed wire, and even to this day, I remember looking down, it'd be a few hundred metres away, and I could see these blokes going from one lot of bushes across to this other lot of bushes, and I thought, I thought they'd be Australians. I didn't know who they were. They didn't have any binoculars, so I couldn't tell. I gave the enemy signal just to see if anyone, but they were I was about 200 metres out from our blokes, and no one paid any attention to me, so I just stood there, and these blokes just went from one into this other bush in front of us. So I don't know who they were. I don't know whether they're our blokes or not. So I didn't bother shooting at anyone. I just let it go. They didn't shoot at me, so I thought, I won't shoot back at them. And but that was quite funny. You're thinking, oh, geez, I might have, Yeah, it might have been the bad guys sneaking up on us, you know. But they used to just walk out like they were all over the place. I mean, it was their country. That was their area. They owned that area, and when we moved in, we put their nose out of joint, and they decided that they were going to kick us out. But they didn't until we wanted to go.
I'll get back to when you originally went out to Firebase Coral. What was your brief? Like, what were you going out there for?
Well, they didn't sort of really tell us much. They just all we got that we were told that we're going to be up at 4 o'clock the next morning, take every weapon we had, all the equipment we had, so which is claymores and M60 machine guns. So we took everything we had, and they just have your breakfast early, and we'll be on the trucks, and we're taking off. They didn't really say where we were going. They just all got their gear and got all the machine guns and everything. We just mounted on these trucks in this big convoy, and off we went.
You were on their trucks, or did you have your
Our trucks went too. Like we had some of our trucks, and there were some transport trucks. There's only a couple of our trucks, I think, and we just climbed in the trucks, and we all took off and went up to like Bearcat, or I can't think of the name of the place, but it was a massive, big American Army base, and we looked as dagies, I think, when we went in there because we had dirty clothes. You know, we travelled through those dirty roads, and we had dirt on. We had, you know, the old thing wrapped around your head, a bit of stuff wrapped around your head, and sleeves out of the shirts, because we were supposed to have long sleeve shirts on, but you had our clothes hanging out, and we pulled up there, and we they said, okay, they took us right onto the perimeter. It had a big bun wall, a real massive big bun wall, and a building, and they said, this is where you blokes put your trucks, and you'll all get out and stay here the night, and which we did. And then we went for a walk through the camp. And so the Americans all had starched clothes on there. It was a big camp, and everything, all strutting around, and all these grubs from Australia. Like, who the hell are these guys? You know, because we all carried our rifles. They didn't carry rifles. We had to take our rifles with us, and we went in. They had everything. Ice cream. You could buy ice cream. They had a swimming pool. They had like we'd buy hamburgers and things like that. It was just an eye opener. We were all walking around, and I had female whites and, you know, all Caucasian, what they call all nationality girls in their army, all army girls, and Vietnamese too. And I remember one part of it. I think it was on this trip. They had the swimming pool there, and they had a guard on it. You couldn't go in, see, unless you had togs and all that sort of stuff. And we went to go in. They said, "Can't go in. Got to have shorts on, togs." Oh, right, so the blokes went around the back and got the bayonets out and cut their trousers off and walked back. And we've got shorts on now. Oh, yeah, you can go in. They went in. I didn't go in because I wasn't interested in swimming. It was I think it was a big above ground pool thing. And they went in there, and I just went wandering off and sat down and had, it was not molten milk, I had something like that, milk drink and hamburger and things like that. And then we went back and slept the night, and the next morning we got up and travelled out to Coral, and we went along this road, and we come to this little, it was an Arvin fort, I think it was, a town, little area. And then we kept on going along. It was a road, but then the area on both sides was cleared for 100 to 200 metres. And then the bush, and then there was all blown up tanks sitting there. I don't know whether they were French ones or who they were, but they were blown up. The Americans, it was an American area, and they'd got the crap knocked out of them the day before. When the infantry went in the day before, that was on the 12th, I think it was. They went in on the 12th. Yeah, they went in the 12th. We left on the 12th. They landed on the 12th. We were on the road on the 12th. They were there overnight. They got attacked, and we arrived the next morning. Well, that morning, before they went in, the Australians flew over the area to check it out before they landed our troops. I think the 101, the 101 Airborne was in there, or something like that, some 1st Division or something was in there. And as they flew over it, they see all these, where there'd been firefights, Americans were in contact, and the helicopter pilot wouldn't go lower, because it's just too hot getting shot at. So when they did their assessment of where our troops were going to be landed, it was done from too high, and they couldn't pick out the lay of the land properly. So that's why when they landed, they were all over the place. They weren't in the places where they should be. And that's why when they got attacked that night, it was just pure luck that they survived, because when they landed, they had their companies all spread over the place, half a kilometre apart. And when they landed the artillery, they put the artillery in and mortars, and they had them facing a certain way. Well, the Nogs were watching all this, and they knew the guns were pointing a certain way. But just after dusk, for some reason, they turned the guns, and where they turned the guns, that's where the attack come from. But there was a big opening, and that's where they killed I think they went through the platoon and killed about 8, 9 blokes in the platoon, and they attacked the gun. They went through the mortars. They got through the mortars, and they hit the artillery and took over one of the guns. And I think one of the sergeants got the MM. He got his group together and raced back in, and well, they fired the artillery into their own gun. They used Splindex as little nails. That sorted them out a bit, and then they went back in and took the gun back. And then we arrived that morning. And I remember when we arrived, when we come down this long road, there was a body in one of our blokes dead in the middle of the road. And they didn't really say much to us. They just said, hop out. And we just all dismounted, and they said, go that way. So we all went through the bush around the back. And when our bosses got to us, they said, this is where you are. Make a fortifications here. This is your perimeter. So they used us basically as a infantry, like the two troops, I think, like infantry. And I think our boss had the assault pioneers, which is the infantry pioneers. They were part of us on one side, and we dug in there, and that's where we just put the strand of barbed wire up, and of course, maybe it was just me, but I think it was everyone thought, oh well, it was just a fluke. They attacked us that night, because we didn't really expect, coming from Nui Dat, we didn't have North regular forces, NVA, North Vietnamese regular forces. We hadn't really come in contact with them. Some of the battalions had before, but I don't think most of us hadn't, and this was their area. This is where they were going into Saigon, taken in for the Tet offensive, and they brought the wounded back out. It was right in the middle, and somehow I thought there was a American base over from us, then there was us, so we used to give each other gun support, and there was another base somewhere else, Australian base at the time. That was the idea. They could fire guns. If we got attacked, they'd fire on us, and we'd fire on them, and all that. And then, as I said, we sort of dug in there, and that was basically what we did. Sort of thing, waited.
So what was like that first night when all of a sudden the mortars start coming in?
Well, as I said, I was sleeping, and the bloke grabbed me by the foot and dragged me out. And I just jumped out, and when I got in, I sort of went half asleep trying to wake it, and it was just because guns fired a lot. The guns are firing out, giving support, and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't pick the difference at the time. I just thought, our guns are firing, because you did it Nui Dat every day and night, they're firing. And I just thought, they're firing out. But when I got in the pit, and I think it was a corporal, he said, they're walking them in. And I thought, I sat down, and then you could hear them fire. You could hear boom, boom, and then you could hear the crump when it hit the ground. And then I thought, shit, there's 2 to our left, not that far away. Then you hear them moving upwards along the wire, and then they turned directly in front of our pit, and they come to the front of our pit and stopped. Well, it was coming in, must be the distance they were shooting them, and it stopped in the front, and they went behind and hit the pit behind us. And then it continued on through there, and then the next bit there was like the whooshing sound of the rockets coming in, and then everyone started, our artillery started, our mortar started, and someone else's artillery started, and and then after a while there was like traces going everywhere. The funny part about it, then we're seeing green traces. I've never seen green traces before. Ours are red, and I think we had seen the green traces earlier on the night, shooting up in the air in different places, and we didn't understand what that was. But we found out later what they were doing. That's how they were coming to us. They'd fire the traces up and get a bearing on it, and they'd move in. That's how they moved into the area, and maybe that's how they got into our we had a big aerial in the middle for our headquarters, and I think they knew that's where that was. And where I was, we had a good killing area. It was bloody real clear, and we had bush on my right and bush on our left. But there's about 3 of our machine guns were sitting right in this killing area, and but we only had 500 rounds each. But I mean, if a lot of blokes come down there and you had heaps of rounds, you could have knocked a lot of them over. But 500 rounds wouldn't went very far. After that, we got a lot more stuff, but. Yeah, it was funny seeing the green trays. It was, oh, look at that. Yeah, I wonder who's got them, because we didn't know it was bad. The other guys had it, because ours are red. And then that night, like the helicopters big gunships come in, and I think they had puffed the Mudgett Dragon. He flew around and shot up a few things. And then we were sitting there sitting here, and I knew there was infantry down to our left, a few hundred metres out in the bush a little bit. And there's the helicopters are coming towards us. I thought, oh, look at that, here they come. You could hear them. And next minute, 50 calibre machine gun opened up on them. And holy shit, they're shooting at them. And next one, the first one did a turn into them and come straight into the traces, straight down the traces, and he just fired everything he had. Rockets, the whole lot, into this tracer, where the tracer was coming from. And then he just seemed he was coming in, and the whole thing just seemed to stop. Like when he fired, he just went boom, and everything, then he just peeled away. And then next minute, the traces started again. So the next one come in, and he fired everything, and no more traces after that. Must have got him. They did get him because they captured the machine gun. And it was all like that. I mean, I don't know if it was the first attack or the second attack I was there for. Well, it was funny. It's when we put up more barbed wire, because I'd been at the front and we had a little tree in front of us where someone used to climb up and stand up this tree and try to see over this bush that was on our right hand side. Anyway, you couldn't see much. You could see down a bit, but you needed binoculars and that. And anyway, one day we were there and we're all sitting around talking and all this sort of stuff, and we all looked up, and it was a few hundred metres. This bush went out to our right, to our left, and this bloke was walking down in shorts and that, wandering down, khaki type of clothes, and no one paid any attention to him. He'd come all the way down the side and didn't put his hands up. And it was from what I heard, he was either a warrant officer from the group that attacked us. They were all killed or something, and he decided to choy hoy and surrender, and because from what they said, he didn't know Australia existed, Anyway, everyone was just looking at him. No one sort of paid any attention. Anyway, he just put his hand and surrendered. They took him into the MPs and he flew him away. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know how true these stories are. I heard that he had went back, and because not long after that there was a big 52 raid further in front of my area. As a matter of fact, the day it happened, I was out on an APC. We were blowing up unexploded bombs, mortars and that were fired into the base, and we were all sitting on the thing, and next to the ground started moving like this, the whole thing, boom, boom, boom. Then you looked up and you just see the smoke, where they were landing, and everything was just shaking, And I heard that, how true it is, that this bloke that surrendered told them where there was a regiment of NVA, so they dropped B-52 strike on it. But those things happened all the time. You used to see B-52 strikes and the ground would shake, and then and we used to try. Like we went out in the APCs one day and we sort of were tearing up and down these roads trying to get them to shoot at us, and then our track fell off. So we come to a screaming halt, and everyone kept on going. So everyone deployed out, and we're sitting there thinking, I hope they don't come out now. But it was the middle of the day, they wouldn't have come out. But the other APC stayed away for a while. I think they're hoping someone would come out and have a shot at us so they can come back. But that was sort of it. And you think, that's when you know you're in a war then.
Was it definitely a real day-night thing with Vietnam as far as the enemy was concerned?
Yeah, basically, yeah. The only, like, when you're doing patrols during the day, you bump into them, because like, when you're in patrols, you're not sort of in your own area. You're walking miles away from your area and you're walking through the jungle. Well, quite obviously, they're doing the same thing. They're either going from place to place, and that's when you bump into them. Well, that's when you have it, But when they do their major attacks, it was normally at night time, because we had helicopters, we had everything. They wouldn't have done it in the daytime. They wouldn't have survived. There's no way. But they were good soldiers. They knew what they were doing. They knew they would die. So, they used to strap timber to their legs so they can drag them away. And the worst, like a lot of things, is body counts. They went into body counts, but we were pretty good on our body counts, because you had to have a body, or you had to have not just two arms, not two left arms. You'd have a right and a left arm, or that type of thing. You had to have the proof that they were people. We always, a lot of contacts, you had blood. Quite obviously people were hit and mostly would die, but there was blood. You can't count that. You didn't count that. You just say blood trail, likelihood of someone being hit, because there's a lot of rounds get fired. Like when we opened up one day there and fired, but you wouldn't see what you hit, because it's just everything's flashing, and it's like when they attacked us that night, it was like by the time it all finished in the morning, or getting into the light, it was just like fog. It was just all cordite, everywhere. It was just amazing the amount of stuff that was fired. Don't know where they got it all from, but they fired it all over the place, and it was quite eerie, really. And then you sit, because the point is you're sitting there waiting, your eyeballs are sticking out, thinking, is there someone going to come through? And you can't see very well at night time because it's pretty dark, you know. But I don't think the nights they attacked us, it didn't seem to be as dark as I wouldn't have liked to attack them. I would rather dark at night. But then again, I wasn't running the show and I wasn't attacking. But I mean, yeah, I think, you know, they did their job. They knew what they were doing. They got pretty close. They knew exactly where we were. There's blokes that were walking through and stepped out, and there's a couple standing up looking at them, and they just step back in the bush and wander off. Things like that happen, you know. Maybe at first they didn't know who the hell we were, you know. They think, who the hell are those gooses, you know. But they soon found out. But there's a few regiments up there in our area, you know, like my first contact. Well, the first time I had a contact was with 4 Battalion. Well, that was, with 4 Battalion was just after Coral. When I went back to Nui Dat, 2 Battalion. See, when I was up at Coral, 2 Battalion went home and 4 Battalion came over. That's when they did the swap, because I was trying to get back to Vung Tau to say hello to my brother on the Sydney or whatever it was, but they quite obviously wouldn't let me go back. And they swapped over, and 4 Battalion had to do its sort of warm-ups, like they did little training exercises and they did little operations. Well, I got back for their first major one, which is Kosciuszko, which is a proper one they did. And that's the first one they got. Their first 2 kills was with C Company, and I was with them. I think they had, I think the Kiwis were with them too that day. I think it was, I don't know, Whiskey Company or whatever it was. And they had 2 blokes wounded, I think, that morning, and we got the 2 blokes the next day, I think. Yeah, they chased a group of blokes, and they set off a claymore mine and wounded 2 of the Kiwis. But that was after Coral, sort of thing.
So on that first night at Coral, you didn't see any enemy movement close by?
No, we just, they were there, you know, like you quite obviously they were around, I mean, but the main thing was trying to dig in. I mean, when we got there, you had to dig, we were lucky we had a backhoe, and he come and dug the front pitch and just 3 trenches back. But we thought, oh, that's pretty good, you know, we got that dug for us, and we just didn't worry about it. We just sat in there, and everyone had their little things dug and had the machine guns, and we had heaps of machine guns, just we didn't have a lot of rounds. And, you know, we just sort of thought it was pretty good.
How long did you stay at Coral for?
I got there on the 13th, that was the second day, and then we went right through until the end, which was, I don't know, it was 26 days or something like that, or more. We had, I think it was 26 days, and we had about 25 killed or something like that. There was something in that, I can't remember. I got the dates in there, on one of my things in there, but I just can't remember. It was a fair while in that terms living, and because it rained and our pits full up with water and all that sort of stuff, and you had to get out and stand in your pit and you're up here in water. And
I was going to ask you about that, because when you first got to Nui Dat, it was in the dry season, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And is that when the Coral was when the wet season?
Yeah, it was. Well, it basically started. It wasn't always wet there. It was just like a couple of nights it poured, and then we had to jump in because my helmet was in the bottom. I couldn't find it one time, but it was all water in your pit. Oh, it was terrible. And then after that, it got more wet and wet. You know, it was like you could set your watch by the rain about 4 o'clock every afternoon. You get your thing of soap and step outside and have your shower, and it just out it come. Yeah, it was quite interesting, really. And then it got real muddy, and you know, that's why they didn't think the tanks would do very good, because it was all muddy. But they did quite well. You know, they travelled along, and I worked with them a few times on different things. You know, yeah, it was quite interesting. Yeah.
So when you were with the APCs, were you in the back or on top?
No, on the top. Yeah, the engineers sat on the top, to the top beside the crew commander, more or less with your feet down the front. That was we were allowed to sit up there. Yeah. Everyone used to sit up there, but they had a big, one of the, I don't know what battalion it was, went over a big mine, and it flattened the whole APC, blew all the blokes out, killed the crew commander, killed the driver. Well, the driver got thrown out and was squashed, and then the crew commander just disappeared from there down, and the back door got blown off and landed on a bloke, and then when the next APC pulled up, and the officer and the medical officer and medic ran up, and they stepped on another mine, an M16 mine, and blew up about 10 more blokes, about 20, 30 injured, you know, and so many killed, about 7 killed, I think. but just picked this APC up and blew it over and blew the track way back. But it was what it was. They used to get these artillery rounds or bombs that would drop from planes, and they'd stick them under the ground, and they'd have what it was. They'd have it wasn't done modern. It was just a couple of bits of timber wire, bit of alfoil sort of stuff, and a little battery or something like that. And when they touched, they just set the thing off. And it just happened that there was a track, and this APC went off to the side of the track and just must have, or another one went over it or something, set it off. I looked at the plan, I couldn't work out which one set the thing off, but it happened to be right on top of it when it went off, and just went bang, and that was it. And then they'd set up a couple of the jumping jacks in the area. I think there's a few blokes got medals that day. I think there was a helicopter pilot got a medal because he brought the helicopter down and landed right where the stuff was going on. And a medic, I think, come in from there. I think a doctor, but that was a little bit. That was just before my time, I think.
In regard to mines and that, and you said you didn't really feel like you'd been probably trained up as far as you should have been. How often did you come across stuff like that was sort of homemade stuff?
Well, we found we found homemade TNT, big blocks of it. It was like I think it was a yellowy colour. Can't remember what. My colours are not real good, and it was just a big block of their own made explosives sitting in the ground. The same thing, just a couple of bits of timber with the wires, and so that when you drove over it, you just push the two down, they'd join, and then it'd go off. I mean, it'd blow a bloody APC over, and it'd kill anyone standing around it. Then we found the old Second World War anti-tank mines. We found a few of those. They're pretty good. I mean, if you stand on them, they don't normally go off when a person stands on them. You've got to have something big to set them off, but we found those. They were all set up one day, and they were for the APCs coming down a track, and just happened to, one of our blokes spotted them and stopped the APCs and pulled them out, and there they were. But we just normally took them out and sent them back. And I think they put them in some museums and things. They, delouse them and put them in. Found a lot of... I think they're called CBUs. They're fired out of the cluster bombs. They're fired out of the jets sometimes, and they didn't go off. They were supposed to blow up all over the place, but they didn't. We found heaps of those lying around. We have to put them up and blow them, and they used to take the top off and turn it upside down. They had a pin on it, and I'm just not too sure. So we went out one day and we were with the APCs, and they spotted all these things sitting around this tree. And my number one and myself went over, and we went over there. And we just happened to be picking them up and stacking them, and just happened to push a tree, and there was one sitting there like with the thing turned upside down there, as if it was set up for us to stand on. But quite obviously we didn't, so we just dug it all out and got rid of all that stuff.
Because before, when you were telling us about the other fellas that got hit doing the delouse, it almost sounded like it was a setup that there was something there to be defused, but that was just a bait to get you in there.
Yeah, that's what it would have been. Yeah, and by putting it in the track, and I think I can't remember if that was true. I know I was told that's what happened because the bloke in front got wounded in the back of the leg, and I was told they stepped over three. Well, even in myself, I think if you're in that situation, someone walked up the track, you'd mess. Oh, I'll just follow him. You think, well, he's going to step on it first, but it doesn't work that way, I mean, unless you follow their footprints. But no, the M16 mine. They were one of the. They used to scare me a lot because you didn't have a chance when you stood on them. They just jumped out the ground and went off at chest height, and there was nothing left. There's some blokes stood on them and didn't go off, but they sort of did. They went boom. And they didn't come out of the ground. They didn't explode. The powder bags must have been wet. Oh, shoot, this is it, But you don't get a chance. Once you walk through on them, it's not like some American movies. They go clunk and hold their foot on them. It's not like that. As soon as you step on them, push the prongs down, and the first powder bag goes off, and the next one ignites. It blows it out the ground. So normally, what happens is you're walking along, you've stepped on it, then you've taken the next pace. You might hear something, but by the time you've taken that next pace, you've come up to about your back height, and the bloke's behind you. He might see it go pump. That's all. That's the last you'll see. It's just bang. Then and it's a pretty big explosion, and it's because it's a pretty big container. So it's full of explosives and that.
Do you think the rate of finding them and delousing them was greater than the rate with which we were victims to them?
They found a lot, but like when most engineers were killed through mines, not delousing them. I think a lot of them are through stepping on them or going forward to check something out and stepping on one. No, they would, well, because there's heaps of mines were found, but there was a heaps of blokes killed. But I think there would have been more mines found than blokes killed and deloused, whatever, made safe.
And I don't know whether you can even answer this, but do you think more engineers got hit by mines than infantry guys? Or?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Sort of. Yeah. Basically, for the size of our unit, like our unit wasn't as big as the infantry type. And when you look at how many infantry blokes that were there compared to engineers, yeah, I think there's a pretty high ratio of blokes. See, a lot of them were killed initially laying. Well, a few of them were killed initially laying the minefield, and putting the strips down and doing them laying. They'll step back on because they're doing it in a hurry, and they'd step back onto the mine. And I think my brother Barry was there one day. This would have been with Fire Battalion, I think it was. And they were down the minefield, and they were on the outside the minefield, and he was, I think it was a platoon, and the officers were standing. They stood on the bun, and the diggers were sitting down there, and they're going to give them, orientation, not an orientation, but the routine orders for the day. And one of the officers slipped off the bun and stepped backwards, and stood on a mine, and went off and killed those two and wounded a few others. Because my brother had to call the helicopter in that day, the medevac. But that happens, all the time. Yeah, you watched everywhere you went. You're always sort of looking around. But if you stepped over a log, you didn't sort of just step on the other side of the log. You sort of checked it all out. You didn't go around it. You had to keep on your ball all the time. Because you're looking for wires and things. I didn't come across any wires across tracks or anything like that. Well, because I was back a bit further, someone else would have found it before me. But but you found lots of, you found things in bunkers. You had like tunnels and things in bunkers. You had to bring out. Not so much. Well, we found in the caves. We found a lot of artillery shells and explosives we had to blow up. Yeah, we found them. We had to get them all out and put them in another area and then blow them up in that area. And we blew up a lot of. They'd be called bunkers, like they're tunnels under the ground, but they were sort of dug and you went into a big bunker and then went around to the next one, like in a semicircle or all that type of thing, or a circle. We had to crawl down inside them and take the explosives in and set them up and then blow all them up. We had a lot of, they flew in a lot of TNT for us once to use because it was old and no good. So we used it all. But we used to, on the land clearing, they used to fly the old TNT out and we used to just blow up trees and just play with it. But it used to, smell and give you a headache and all that sort of stuff. But,
what was it that gave you a headache from it?
I don't know, not too sure. Like I know, it's just the smell of it. I'm not too sure. But like I know, if what's it? Gelignite. It's something in it. When you get it on your hand, if you rub your head, it goes into your head and gives you a bad headache. I think there's something to do with the TNT. It could have been just the heat of the day and the smell. Like it was hot and we're doing all this stuff, but it was smelly. When you did land clearing, sometimes you're in the back of an APC. In the bulldozer with the crew, with the bloke operating it. I didn't like that very much because you can't hear anything or see anything. Like you're sitting there and he's pushing all this bush in, and you're sitting beside him with a rifle, which I thought was quite stupid. It should have been outside there, and he's just and all this dust is going everywhere, and he's got a big cage around him, but they can be sitting back there and take shot. They could hit you before you wouldn't even hear the bullets. But one of my mates got blown up. He's at Green Slopes. He's there all the time. He was a tunnel rat, and he did 98 days as a tunnel rat, and then because he was at Planty, he got sick of it. He said, "I want to go back to planting." And his first time out of Planty, he ran over a mine and over a bomb or something blew him up. That's a lie. He was rocketed. They dropped his bulldozer off, and to do this clearing, and he said, "Is it all clear up there?" And they said, "Oh, the Kiwis are up there." I think it was the Kiwis are up further. They just go up there and join them. They'll protect you. And he trundled up in his bulldozer. Couldn't hear anything. Next minute, he got a rocket through the front and rocket through the side. Got wounded in the legs, his ears, and in the back. And it just caught fire, so he just sort of hopped off. and they must have took off. They didn't try to shoot him, and he just hopped off, and it just kept on burning. So they had to send out another one and dig a hole and put it in and cover it, just put it out, because they had no fire brigade gear. But he's still having heaps of trouble. Yeah. And he's got big scars down his back, and he's in pain all the time. You know, but these things happen.
You were telling us about you were with Field Team when they went out and got their first 2 kills.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was Operation Kosciuszko, I think that was. I looked up in the book before. Kosciuszko, it was a battalion operation, because it was their first real one, and it wasn't a long one, if I can remember. It wasn't only went for a few days, but we flew out in the helicopters, and I think that was the first one I went in, like machine guns blazing. It was Americans and hot landing, because it scared the living shit out of everyone, I think, because we're all just sitting there going, and next minute all the machine guns started. I think, holy hell, what's going on here? And we had then they wouldn't land properly, so we had to jump out, and we got out, and then we just did on the patrol, and we were going through one side of the mountains, and I think Kiwis went into like a valley, and they went on the other side, walking on the edge, not right up the mountain, just on the edge of the mountains. And we're going through, and next minute we heard a bit of fire, and then an explosion. And then it came over the radio that they ran into a caretaker group. A couple of their people were wounded. They didn't know if they hit anyone. Anyway, I think it was a day or so later, we sort of had gone in, and then we come up against this. It was a funny thing, really, because we're walking through the bush, and it was sort of low, like bush about this high, and we're sort of going just above our heads. We're walking through, and it was like someone was playing games, had little housing thing, like little plans of like things and fences and on the ground. And we went through that, and then we come to this. There was a track, and the company commander said to our platoon, "Go down the track and go as far as you can." And because they had a bicycle track in it, like someone ridden a bicycle up there. And so the bloke I was with, he was my number one. He said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "Well, should stick to the back. If anything's going to happen, be up the front," type of thing, you know, like that's because all the rest of them are going to be back here. And they deployed out there, and so we just off down this. We weren't on the track. We got right down beside it, and the track was up high, and we're walking through the bush beside it, and we were trundling along, and then we were next. We were next to the.
Stop. Yeah. What's that like being on call all the time? Must be a bit annoying, isn't it?
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're camped just down beside the track there.
Yeah. We started walking along beside this track, and we went in a fairway, went for a fairway, and then we come to what happened was they must have had bombs dropped there at one time and cleared the trees out, because you couldn't see the track from the top because the trees had grown over it, and it was all clear. So, and as we come, there's a big. I remember this big log line there. And the first blokes went through, and then my mate went through, then I went through, and then there was a machine gun group after it. And we're up to going through the clearing, yeah.
Going down beside the path.
Yeah, going down
near
the path.
tree.
Yeah, and we found there's a dead log, and it was all clear. So, as I said, everyone had gone through first, and then there was number one went through, and like he got through, and then I got down and went through, and climbed into the other bush, and then just as we got into the thick of the bush, the next minute it opened up. There was machine gun fire, and then we heard contact rear, and then a lot of screaming and shooting. You could hear the rounds hitting the trees and going through, and that's when I said, like I was talking about before, how your training comes in. Because I don't remember even to this day how I got to the ground. I just must have went down real quick, and then I sort of, I turned, look for somewhere to hide, you know, get behind, and everyone had this big, only one big tree that was right near us. About 4 of them had it, you know. So, and I remember laying there, and of course all the shouting, and I called them for medic and all that sort of stuff, and I thought, oh, hey, what's going on here? And everyone started to move from the front, going back, and the lieutenant ran back, and I thought, first thought came to my mind was, I hope this is not long 10 all over again, you know, they're not retreating or something, you know. But anyway, when they all went through, and then we realised we had to pull back, we moved back, and then as I went back through the clearing, I looked up onto the track, and there was 2 bodies on the track, and the machine gunner was laying up against the side of his rifleman, and where the log was a sergeant who happened to know my brother. He was in 4 Battalion with him in Malaya, and because once I landed I had to give my name, he knew who I was, and he sort of said to me, he said, do you want to stay here? he was talking to me, not my number one, because he didn't realise the number one and number two. And I said, I've got to stick with me number one, and because we went past and went out. But now I know what he wanted. He wanted us to go and clear the bodies, you know, and check the bodies. But I didn't know then. So we went and just lie down off the infantry on the side there, and we could hear people running through the bushes and everything. And I was sitting there, and I looked at my number one, and he said, we don't have to really be here. So we got up and we went back into where the lieutenant was in there, and that's when they brought the bodies. They went down and got the bodies and brought them up and did a search. They're only young fellas, 16 or something, but they were tax collectors. It turned out to be tax collectors. They'd been in villages collecting money off people, and there's about 5 of them. We don't know how they got there, but they happened to come in from behind us. They walked along the track behind us, and it was just lucky that the machine gunner or whoever it was turned and seen them before they opened up. They got some rounds out, but the machine gunner and the rifleman knocked 2 of them over real quick, and you know, like it was quite not unusual. But that's, yeah, they dragged the bodies up and sort of searching them, and you're thinking, shit, you know, this is what it's all about, you know. Well, I'd venture a car on it, but I mean it's pretty close, and they're only young fellas, but one was hitting the head and one was hitting the chest, and with an SLR, that 7.62 round going through, that doesn't leave a real lot. And then after that, we were sitting there, and the sergeant come back up and he said, oh, Steve, he said, get your mate, and he said, go down the track there, about 100 metres or so, 150 metres, and hop in off the left in there in the bush. And he said, there should be another section coming up that track. He said, don't shoot at them, just let them come past. And I thought, oh, okay. So we went down and we hopped into this, off the track, went into the bush, and we sat down behind this log, and I looked over to my left, and even to this day I don't know what I seen, but to me I thought, that's some person standing like trying to hide behind a tree. And I looked at my mate, and I looked, you know, like that, and he said, just ignore it. So we did. And I don't know what we should have done after, you know. But anyway, then what happened was I think the company commander came up, and then he asked who was down there, and they said the engineers. So he said replace them. So they replaced us because it wasn't our job to do that. Yeah, so it was just so quick and so noisy, and I mean you could still hear the rounds hitting the leaves, going through the leaves and hitting the trees, and you know, it was all around you. It was just lucky, I suppose, no one else got hit, because the angle they come through from behind us, they fired into our position. But it was just lucky our 2 blokes were quicker, and you know, finished it off.
Actually, you were saying before you had 4 water bottles. How, in the sort of heat that you were operating in, how long did the 4 bottles last you?
Oh, you'd have to try and drink sparingly, because that's, you know, you only get resupply every now and again. You didn't get it every day, and if you didn't have your own water, you have to go out a creek, which you had water purification tablets, but they'd last a fair while. They'd, you know, like a few days. I had, as I said, I might have had more, because I had ones on my belt and I had one on my pack, or 2 on my side of my pack. But yeah, you had to carry, especially in the dry season, because there's no water, and they'd only resupply every 4 days. It depends on what rations they gave you. You know, they might give you a 7-man ration pack, or a 2-man ration pack, or a 2-day ration pack, basically something like that. And then you just had to supply it, go along as long as you can, and resupply when you can.
Because I think you also said when you first got your webbing, it was the old stuff.
Yeah.
When did they change it over?
Well, they didn't. Some of the blokes are still wearing the old packs from when I got there. Some of the infantry blokes. But what happened was, when I got there, someone went down to, I don't know where they went, but they bought an American pack, and they had 2, so I bought 1. And then same as the camouflage, they had this tiger stripes, so he had it set, and I fitted me, so I wore tiger stripes, you know.
And there was no problem wearing stuff outside of the...
No, not really. I wore on coral. I used to wear I cut the sleeves out of the shirt because they were too short, because weren't built for me. But the trousers, I wore them a lot of times, and but sometimes I'd wear maybe long sleeve green, and then just put it over, keep me warm, you know, because it got cold at night time, even up there in the summertime. At night time I got cool. But you know, I used to like wearing my cams. They bloody felt, and they were good. You know, they were all good quality. And then when we went up to Coral, we got a lot of American gear. because that's where I could have got a bit confused before which time, like when I said I went to that place and we went into the pool and all that. There was one time we went up there, well, it must have been the same time because the sergeant went away and he was drinking with one of these warrant officers from America. And yeah, it was the same time because he was drinking with them. And when we got out to Coral, pulled it back the truck up, he had all these American boots and greens and everything. And we found out later that he got on a grog with this warrant officer from American stores. Anyway, he got him to give him all this gear. Anyway, the warrant officer got caught, but he didn't get caught. But we put the I had the American greens and the jacket. You know, I liked them. You know, I reckon they felt comfortable. They had the pockets that flared out a bit, looked a bit more stylish than ours. And eventually, a lot of Australians had the American. Like what happens is when I left, I just left all my gear there. So the next bloke just took it, you know. So you ended up getting all this different sorts of stuff. But you know.
How was the Australian gear in general?
Well, it was basically old type of stuff. I mean, the gear we did, like some of the gear we had, the new style, I call it pixie gear, they used to call it. They used to have elastic around the bottom and the different pockets on the front here. They were imitation American types, and I don't believe they were any good because the pockets are in the front here, and if you put anything in the pockets on the front and you lay down, they weren't any good. They should be on the side. They tried the different angle pockets on here, but still can only get something in it because it's flat. With the Americans, and the new ones like today all fold out, so you can put more gear in. The material was good, but yeah, most of the grunts wore their gear until they rotted off them. They had, you know, holes in their trousers and they were rotted, and you know, yeah. But that's the way they wanted to be, I suppose. Out in the bush, they felt comfortable, you know. But yeah, most of the American stuff was good. I liked it. A lot of blokes didn't like it, you know. A lot of blokes didn't like the Armalite rifle. I had troubles with it, but I didn't mind it. You know, there was heaps of them around. I know that someone told me that there was a problem with the bolt. That's why they had problems. And I think somewhere I read the Americans when they first went there, that's how a lot of men died because their weapons jammed. And after a couple of rounds, they jammed, and that was it. They couldn't strip them. They were dead. You know, so they improved the bolt system, I think, on them.
Do you know whether your bolt was eventually changed, or like while you had it? Or?
No, not while I had it. No. Well, we didn't know about it then. And the second, I think one of the times it was the round jammed up the spout, so it was a round, something wrong with the round or something. But you know, when you're shooting and it jams, it doesn't give you much time. You've got to try and strip your weapon down, clear the barrel. But see, I was with the APCs then, and I had an M1 carbine too. And so I just grabbed that and started firing with that, and also had a pistol too. So I got to fire them all, you know. But then I lost I left all my, I had a box of rounds and magazines for my M1, and I left it in one of the APCs, and that was it. Never found it again after that, and they handed me M1 back because they got a bit, they stopped us from using foreign weapons, like 45s, we could only have a 9mm pistol. M1s, you weren't allowed to have them because people were accidentally shooting themselves, I reckon, so they sort of banned all those weapons. And we just, like, I only had 9mm in there. Well, I could have bought a 45 for $75, you know, brand new and pouch and everything. But I used a 9mm. It wasn't bad, easy to use, but not, you know, the 9mm today are a lot better than 9mm years ago. But
and was that standard issue for all the?
for Australians, it was. Yeah, engineers had, the number ones had 9mm pistol, but not everyone had one. I think the number ones had them, about all. And I think the corporal might have had one, and the officers had one. Of course, officers always have a pistol. Yeah, I think the Americans were the same. Not everyone had a pistol, just certain people. Radio operator might have had one, but no. So yeah.
Did you ever see any of the sort of defoliant that they used over there?
Yeah, we'd seen them spraying it. Yeah, they used to fly over and spray it. And they used to fly. I think they were Hercs. I think they were using Hercs or something like that. They used to fly over and just spray it out the back. A lot of it was just sprayed over the bush, and then it rained and just dripped through on top of you and things like that. You know, I never really thought much of it at the time. You don't think much of it at the time. You just think it's something they have to do. I didn't even know what they were doing it for, really. I didn't know what they were really doing, you know. But but it surely did kill a lot of the stuff, and it killed everything. You know, it did what it was designed to do. But when you look back on it, you think, geez, you have to be dumb to think that it wouldn't hurt someone, you know. And I think that could be partly to do with my throat, even though I've had the problem with the fire, getting the chemicals. But I think that could have something to do with my throat being sore. My brothers have all been sick. You know, eldest brother, well, Trevor died of cancer. Barry's got internal problems, a bit of cancer, things like that, stomach problems. He's had everything taken out, and he had lots of things. So I got all of it out of the family. I got off it about the best, I think. You know, so that, you know, it's not too bad.
Could you smell it when they spray?
Yeah, it was just like, just a bit like the, what do you call it? Roundup type of smell. It was a funny smell. Yeah.
How about when you come back from a patrol? How do you unwind?
Oh, most time. Well, when you got back, you had to get back, get your gear cleaned up. You know, you wash your clothes, do your boots, and clean your weapon. That was always on. You had to clean your weapon, then restack your pack, get all your gear, check your ammo, clean your ammo, fix your magazines up, empty your water, get new water. Did all that, and then you'd normally get back. Say you got back in the morning, you'd have the afternoon off. Then you just get back and clean up, and then you'd sit down and have a beer in the afternoon. Sometimes they might have a barbecue on for you, and you used to get meat. They used to fly in meat, T-bones and meat for you and things like that. So that was your big day, and then all had a few beers, and then depends what happened the next day. Sometimes you didn't go straight out the bush. Sometimes you might have had the company you worked with might have been at the Horseshoe, so they had nothing for you to do. So you went and did engineer tasks, like our blokes were doing culverts and things like that. And I'd still be the driver. I was the boss's driver, the lieutenant's driver. So I'd just drive the, you know, not the soft drinks, but cordials around and coffee, and so they have something while I'm building these culverts and roads. And when they're building 3 battalions area, I just drove over there and give them some stuff and make sure they were fed and things like that. And then I might have to go with the lieutenant down to the battalion and get some maps and things like that, you know.
What other nicknames for other corps and things like that?
I'm trying to think. Oh, that's got me. There would be a name for the tankies, but I can't think of it.
Buckets?
Something like buckets or something like that. They did have names for most things, and our real nicknames, like our engineers, are called Holdfast anyway. That's by radio messages, Holdfast. That's because we hold fast, so we're good. But then you know, just basic things like that. I didn't get much time to really mix with the tankies. You know, like, I mean, you're out with them, but you're still with your mate, and like they'd pull up in the APC and they'd be doing their little bit, and you'd get out and do your bit. The APCs, they used to sleep inside, and they had a nice little room to sleep in, and but it smelt in a lot of the APCs. They stunk because everyone's sitting in them all the time, sweating, and you had infantry in there and dirty boots, walked through dog shit and everything like that. So I'd rather sleep out in the bush. Yeah. I slept beside a tank one night at Centurion, and my mate and I said, well, hutch up beside the tent at the tank. It would be quite safe here. Anyway, during the night they decided to shoot something. And we're laying there, next minute you hear the gun start like moving. We started and they're moving the gun. What the hell are these guys going to do? They brought it right around across the top of us. Holy shit. So we got out from underneath there, and next minute fired it. I'm not too sure what they were shooting at, but they were shooting at something a long way away, yeah. But they had the big screen on, they used to be able to look out at night scope on it. Right. And that was on a road runner operation we did. We lost 2 tanks that day, I think, or that morning before. I ran over a couple of mines. Well, I wasn't on the initial road runner operation. I was back at base, and they went out on a road run operation, and I think one tank was going down the bitumen, down the road, and it ran over a TNT charge and just went boom underneath it and sort of stopped. And then everyone deployed off the road into the bush, and then they all sat around and they got the engineers out and they checked the road and taped the road. A couple that were there, and anyway they decided the road was safe, so the next big Centurion rolled off down the track where someone's already been driving in and out, and they'd rolled off into there and they ran over a big bomb, and then next minute we're at Nui Dat, and they just ordered one troop together and get all your gear, and what's going on here? So we grabbed all our gear and mine detectors and and all jumped in the helicopters and out we went, and they dropped us off there, and they said we want the whole road taped. And this Centurion was sitting there, we had the back big wheel and the back blown off and all the tread everywhere, and the blokes were still sitting on top of it. One bloke cut his head open, the driver cut his head on, I think, but it was sitting up off the ground like this, in a massive big hole there. And then we, if I remember rightly, we swept the road and then come back and checked our mine detectors, and the batteries were flat. They weren't working properly, so then we just all jumped on we stuck with them then and just did a bit of patrol with them. But no, that's that was basically that.
From the time you got a call that you had to go to something like that, how long would it take you to get ready to sort of get down to the
I wouldn't take it long. You had all your gear ready. All your gear was packed. Your rifles there, everything. So you had the rifle with you. Your webbing was in your tent. You just grabbed it, and whatever helipad they told you to go to, you just got all your gear, and everyone marched in. And then when the helicopters come in, you got in your sections and just jumped in, and off you went. And did that sort of thing. So yeah, it was pretty quick. There's no, the only trouble that have is if you're out doing sort of, culvert or something, and you're on the other side of the camp, which I don't think it never happened in that situation. I think must have been in there that day when that happened. So it must have been in the morning when it happened. So we just got on the helicopter and flew out. So. What
about what was your first encounter with the tunnels?
Well, the first one was on Santa Fe by just looking at them. I wasn't going to go down them. They were just there. And then I think it would have been, who was it with? I think it started around 4. I don't think we've seen any on, not that I'd say on there was bunkers on Coral, but there wasn't any tunnels that I know of. But the main ones started with 4 Battalion. When we started going up in the mountains and things like that, like when we went up there, we found this it was a big bunker complex. We walked through it for ages and ages. It was just all gun pits and bunkers. It was built for regiments, but it was built over years, I'd say. But it was, there were people there. Like there was hot something been cooking. They must have heard us coming, and they just went for miles, and they had bunkers, and we searched them. But most of them were searched before, and if you're with the first platoon when you find it, you sort of move on. Then I think they used to bring the assault pioneers in or someone, and they'd do a check. You'd only do the initial sort of check. And when we found the caves, well, we didn't find them. Someone else found them. We went up. They found these caves and they had a big contact, and we were down the bottom. And so we went up for the Kiwis. Was it Kiwis that time? No, I don't think there wasn't the Kiwis that time. We went up the top, and we had to just go in the caves, and that's when we pulled out all the bombs and things like that. But you couldn't go too far because they just went in the big caves, those little holes and openings you had to crawl through, and you just went in as far as you could. Like the tunnels mainly, I think, were basically when 3 Troop was over there originally. That was 65 or something. That's the tunnels of Choo Chee. I think they found them with 1 Battalion, and they did a lot of searching. Then they handed it back to the Americans, and they searched them for the rest of the war. But I think the Australians, from the history I read, come closest to solving the problem down there. They're only 1 door away from getting through and finding out all the information. But they didn't go through that 1 door, or they didn't find it.
So did you have to ever go down into the tunnels?
Yeah, you had to go down and crawl through them, and that's when we blew up the bunkers and things. You had to crawl through. It was all dark, and you had a torch and things like that, and just had to take your explosives down, wire it all up, and get your detonators in there, and run your bloody cord through. Do the measurements, the same thing, and how long it's going to take to burn, and we one there, I can't think how much explosives we put in. We put in each bunker. We put heaps of explosives in them. It takes a long time. You're all cramped. Like the tunnel's it's only a small area like this, and you've got to crawl through. Then you might come into something about as big as this, where it's bunged up, and you've got a slit in the door and slit where you can see through, and you just sit in there and you sit it all up. But the caves are just dark. You can't see much, and you're supposed to search certain ways with your pistol and your torch. And I normally carried my Armalite when I went and carried my Armalite in. Unless it was too narrow, you couldn't get your Armalite in, then you carry a pistol. But it was just mainly smelly and dirty. It was yuck. Not crap, but muddy, and it was terrible. I didn't like it at all. And besides, you couldn't see. There could be snakes and spiders in there. Things like that.
Was going down in the tunnels the worst thing that you had to do over there?
Oh yeah, I don't think it's natural to do things like that normally, unless you're a miner or something like that. But not for the average person. I don't think it's natural to go into something that's narrow and squeeze your shoulders in, and hoping that it's, like hoping it's bigger inside. I mean, you don't know. You don't know what's around the next bend. So I think that's I don't like. I never, since I've never really liked tight spaces. I get into lifts a bit easier now, but I had trouble in the enemy fire brigade career with claustrophobia.
Do you think that stems from
Oh,
your
I
tunnel
think
experience?
I think so. Yeah. It's just something that happens to me. And in the end of my fire brigade career, something just snapped in my head, and I just couldn't even put the mask on. Well, I could put the mask on, but I had panic attacks. So and I was inhaling all the time instead of breathing out, and that's made me feel as if I was suffocating. So I try and pull my mask off, and that's why I had to get out in the end. I think I could put one on now and can go in through a house, but it's when you're in somewhere like a big building, and that's like being in a tunnel. You don't know where you're going. You go in there and you just don't know. You just follow this thing around, or a cave or whatever. You get into a building, it's the same thing. If it's a 5-story building and you climb up and go up the middle of it, and you're walking through, you're walking around, especially if say it's a carpet place or something like that, you're walking around little chairs and things, and you can't see because it's black smoke, and if your face mask comes off, you're dead. And then the roof might fall in on you. So these sort of things play on your mind all the time. And eventually, maybe what happened to me, it sort of overrid everything and said, that's enough, can't do it anymore.
So on which occasions did you have to use, or maybe even the first occasion where you actually had to use your personal weapon?
I think the first time would have been coral. I think first time I fired it.
Was that on the first night or the second?
That was a daytime in the morning. I fired in the morning. Opened up in the morning, early in the morning. Well, someone fired at us, so we fired back. Everyone fired back. But I killed a lot of trees, and well, anyway, they scared the shit out of us, and we scared the shit out of them, I reckon. But everyone fired back, and that was the first time. As I said, you sort of like not firing at night time. It's like daytime you can see what's going on, but night time is very hard. It's all sort of funny. It's and you can't really look down your barrel and get a sight at night time. It's nearly all open shooting at night time. That's when you want to have the M60, get more rounds out. But that was, I think coral would have been the first time, I think. And then it might have been, was it Long Highs? I don't know. It might have been the first time I went out at Long Highs. That might have been when I first used it up on that hill with the light. I think that must have been it. That's when it must have been when I fired there. Then at another time, I just can't remember if it's the same operation or there was one wheel firing up at this light, and another one I was with the APCs, and I was on a side flank, and the APCs opened up and we got out and fired up. And, well, it was a light, there was something moving in front of us, so we opened up on the light.
So what is it that you remember? Do you remember the action or the location or the name of the operation?
Well, I never remember the name of the operation. It's just what happened at the time. You remember getting out and my mate firing, and the 50 cals and the 30 cals firing, because they're pretty awesome. And then you get out and you just blaze away. It's just that time, and I think because the light was there, it was, to me, the first one with the light was so funny. I mean, like, it didn't seem like a war to me. It was just bloody hilarious, all these modern things sitting down there and then blasting the hell out of this little light, and then it comes back on again. You think, holy bloody hell, it's one. To me, it was sort of that, and you thought, oh, that was quite hilarious, I reckon. But it was still good to have a shot at it. I mean, everyone was eager to have a shot at it. Everyone wanted to. And I think the bosses knew the boys want to have a go at this thing, and so they let us have a go at it. And if the big gun wasn't going to get it, their little pot shots weren't going to get it. But that was the same at Coral. We were there, and we had this light that used to come all across the front. It's roughly where I said I seen when the day I was at the front, and I seen these people going from one area into the bush. Well, that was a big expand of jungle, and that's where this light used to come along of a night time. And I remember we used to sit there and watch it because we're not allowed to shoot, so you just sit there and watch this bloody thing. And Lieutenant Holst comes up and Yeah, I think it was Hulse, yeah. And he come up to the team. We said, "Look at that out there. How about we get a section to everyone go out and get that?" You know. He said, "I'll check and see if they're allowed to do it." But they wouldn't let us do it. We wouldn't have come back. We'd have got lost. But you know, we wanted to get out there, and you know, it was annoying the hell out of us. You know, just what is that? Let's get it. You know. But they wouldn't let you. You know, you weren't allowed to make noise at night time. You weren't allowed to do anything. You know, you just had to sit there and be quiet. You can only whisper. You know, and you couldn't muck around with your weapons and that was a hard thing because you're sitting there, especially on picket, you're trying to keep your eye, and being dark, you tend to start staring at something, you know, and that's when your eyes start playing up. And I don't think we had any night scopes at Coral. I think the infantry might have had some, but we had them back at Nui Dat. But they were massive, big night scope, and what it was just sort of lightened it up a bit, and you could see trees and stuff. But I still didn't think they were that good, you know. Not the one I had anyway. I couldn't see much out of it, but they would have been good to have at Coral. All the gear they got today would have been great in Vietnam, you know. You know, the little dots, little red dot things. You could have been shooting them around, you know, putting them on things, and that would have been great. Yeah. But we didn't have them then, so that's it.
What stands out as being the hairiest moment for you in Vietnam?
Oh, I think one thing wasn't really, well, it was scary. I reckon it was scary. Other people might, but we were getting into Baby Herc. I don't know if I was going on leave or coming home. But we were down at the airstrip there waiting. We were all dressed in uniform to go where we were going to leave or whatever it was. And these three Hercs come out. They had jet assist, little jets on the back. And one flew in, brand new one, landed, and oh yeah. Next one in, brand new one, landed. Oh yeah, that's good. But there was all infantry people there, and I thought, oh, and then the last one come in. It was a daggy looking thing, and all smoke coming out of one engine. And I said, that will be ours for sure, and it was. And I remember getting in it. The mate was with me, and we climbed inside, and I was the last seat, sitting like this, and there's a big window there. And before we got on, the bloke in the back that operates the thing, he climbed out, and you could see him look around at this motor with the smoke coming out, and he's on his thing talking to the pilot and going on. I thought, oh, this is great. Anyway, we climbed in, and my mate said, because it was too noisy when we got in there, he said, don't worry about it. They know what they're doing. I was in the Air Force years ago. And oh, okay, so we sat down. Anyway, we took off down the runway, and off she went, and we were sort of looking out through the windows, and it was going towards the Warburton Mountains, but it wasn't getting high. It was sort of just staying there, and they hit the jets to get them off. And it went up, and then when the jets went off, they just started to drop again. I thought, something's not going right here. And anyway, next minute we're flying, there was a big bang from outside where that motor was. And I thought, oh, this is it. I'm going to die here. Anyway, the loadmaster must have looked out the window and had a talk into his thing. And he didn't seem worried, and my mate said, well, he's not worried, so it's all right. And I think that's what scared me about planes, because you had no control of it. You're sitting there in the seat saying, oh, this is it, you know. That was scary, but you know, like going down tunnels was scary. But it's not. I don't think when you're young, you're not really sort of scared. Like now, I'm more worried about things than maybe I understand what can happen, you know. But you know, I think you're sort of gung ho, and you get frightened, but it wears off. You know, like you might be frightened for that second, and then the next day, oh look what we did. Oh, you have a beer and everyone, it's all right, you know. But as you get older, I think you think, oh, you stupid fool, you know, what could you have done there? Could have hurt yourself, you know. And I think that's what it is. And having your mates around you too makes you a bit more gung-ho-ish.
What was the PX like? Sounds quite different to anything that the Australians would have been used to.
Oh, it was a big tin shed basically, and they just had all the gear in there. Just went in, like you could buy. Well, I bought a big tape, and Akai tape. But the tape I wanted was a big tall one, and that's the one. It was a fair bit of money in those days, but that's the one I wanted. But they was only ones that the officers got them first. You know, they're on order, so I had to go down the line. So I got this other one, you know. But I really wanted the big one, but I got one anyway. So, but then I never used it. Same as I bought that little tape to tape my messages on. I ended up giving it to one of the blokes up there because I couldn't use it properly. I couldn't do it, you know. So then I wrote a couple of letters instead. But no, but you can buy anything you wanted there, most things there. Yeah, it was pretty good.
What about news from the world? Like, did you ever get newspapers and magazines or anything like that?
Yeah, we had a lot of, I think it was Post, I think it was, or Pix magazines. Used to be, we had them, and then we had, I can't remember if we had Australian papers. I don't think we had Australian papers. I can't remember, you know. Someone might have went, say, on leave and come home with some Playboy magazines or whatever they had in those days, and they might have been, wow, I've got this, you know. Everyone shared them around type of thing. And someone might have sent stuff over. Mum sent me over some packs of stuff, you know, cake in it and all that sort of stuff, Christmas cake or whatever it was in there, and, you know, you'd share that around. Didn't go far because it was only a small box, but no, we'd share most things, and you'd share everything you could, really.
What about, was there any sort of radio broadcast you could tune into? Or?
Yeah, there was one, I don't know, Radio Australia, or there was a program that went on all the time, just music all the time, and 60s music, and new, like, they're telling you things, all good stuff, you know, we're winning the war. And
So with the radio broadcast, or did you get any news of what was happening back in Australia at all?
I just can't remember. I think we must have. Most of the stuff I remember is when I was home and with, like, long tan or something like that, but I can't remember a lot unless it was in letters or something like that. I guess can't. You know, we sort of knew that there was, well, we knew there was protests on and all that because everyone coming over was saying, you know, what was happening over there, and there mostly was papers, but I can't remember bringing them over. I just can't remember.
How did that make you feel knowing about all the protest movement in Australia?
Oh, well, I just disagreed with them. You know, I just said they were wrong. You know, like it. You know, I believed in the domino theory, still do. I still believe in communism not being good, and it's not, because that's why it's folded, and it was always going to fold. But we've got something worse now. So, but you know, I just believe we were right. I'm a bit upset about the way it was done. That we could have won. Well, we did win the war. It was won in 1968 in the Tet Offensive. We absolutely slaughtered them, and they weren't coming back from that. And the only thing that went wrong was the president, but he declared a 2 years non-bombing of Hanoi. He should have went further in. We should have attacked. They were too scared of China and Korea, China and Russia. I think we should have just pulled their bluff, seen how they went. You know, like I might have lost a few more lives, but then again, I might have saved a few million Cambodians. You know, you don't know. And when you look at like. Well, yeah, when you spoke to people, like, you felt sorry for them because they were in between. They were sort of had nothing really. All they wanted to do really was just be left alone. The farmers just wanted to be left alone. The people in the south, in the rich, like not the rich ones, but the people with a bit of money and had businesses, wanted to be like the Western world because it was freedom, you know. And they knew that. I think they even knew then, even if the North took over. Well, even if the North took over, they wouldn't be free, and they're still not free. You know, the South is still the shit end of the country, and they treat it that way. They put all the money into the North, and that's through mates of mine that have gone back there, said that. And you know, like it was sad that people were protesting about you because it wasn't the Nashos' fault. I mean, they were just conscripted. And told to go. I mean, I felt sorry for them because a lot of them lost their wives or their girlfriends because they were pulled away for 2 years. And I think it would have been different if we didn't have national service. I don't think it would have been more popular. And I don't really think we needed national service. We needed it in a way that they could have stayed at Australia and done other things, but I think we had enough soldiers. We would have got enough volunteers to go. There was heaps of blokes volunteering to go, couldn't go because national servicemen were taking their positions, and that's where a lot of you know, people were disgruntled about it. They couldn't get in and that's why sometimes I get cranky with some of these nashos. I've said it to at the hospital, a few of them. Oh, I didn't want to go. I said, crap. You know, unless you were in the battalion, you would have went because you know they wanted you to go. But if you're in, say, engineers, and one for one. If you would have said no, I'll swap with someone, they would have been someone that I did it. So they, you know, you would have been able to do it. They didn't just do it for me. You know, but then in the other way, I feel sorry for them because they had to give up 2 years of their life where I volunteered for. I put my name down for 6 years. You know, but I put my name down like thinking that if it goes to war, I have to go to war. That's what you join the services for. It's no good joining the services saying, oh, I don't want to go to war. I mean, if you've got that attitude, you shouldn't be in there. It's like a few people today don't want to go anywhere. They want to get the good money, but they don't want to do anything. So, well, they should be kicked out automatically. No, otherwise, I think most things are all right. The politicians should have kept their nose out, let the army run it, especially the American politicians. Australian politicians didn't really have much to do with it, though. They weren't even thought about, really. But the American politicians should have kept out of it and just let the troops do what they had to do. And the Americans weren't fighting it the way it should have been fought. They were fighting it more like the Desert War, or, you know, like, well, bring in heaps of tanks, we'll blow the living crap out of them. But that's not the way. The only way to beat them was the same way as they were doing it in jungle warfare. And any guerrilla warfare will always take more casualties than having heaps of men. I mean, that's why they're doing it now. It's, you know, like the IRA's been going for years and they haven't cracked them, and there's only about 30 or 40 blokes in that. So, I mean, they do a lot of damage for a small group of people. That's how I look at it anyway.
Do you feel like the Australians were more effective in what they were assigned to do than the Americans?
Yeah, the only thing I didn't like about Australians, if you had a contact, they pulled you out real quick, because the politicians didn't want any of their men well, we didn't want anyone getting killed either, but I think instead of getting into it, hitting them while you had them down, it was, oh, call the artillery, but they're gone. They've gone down the road somewhere. But as soldiers, I think we're good, because we were lucky, really, compared to most. Well, the English army was all right, but you know, we had jungle warfare blokes from the Second World War training us. You know, or, blokes who'd been to New Guinea. Then you had the Korean blokes, and you know, like there were still blokes who Second World War blokes in the army when I joined. And well, that's where we got our experience, and they fought in the jungles, like they fought in Malaya and Borneo. Well, that's where the experience come from. Where the Americans, people don't realise, didn't have that. That mostly, some of them were trained in the desert before they went to Vietnam. I mean, in bulk. I mean, you just can't do that sort of thing. And they train them up in the bloody snowy mountains or something, you know, like in the snow. I mean, that's how stupid it was. But now you can see that things are changing. The whole services are changing to go more specialised, and they're training them in the way they should be trained to work more effectively.
With all the stuff that was happening in Australia, you know, the anti-war movement, was that really affecting the soldiers, the Australian soldiers in Vietnam?
No, it didn't affect me. I don't think it affected many blokes. No, I don't think so. I don't. In my own the way I see things in my head now, I didn't see anyone going around saying, "Oh, look at this," you know, because you're too busy doing what you had to do. You know, you didn't have time to really sit down. Yeah, you might sit down and think, "Oh, geez," you know. You see blokes who lost their girlfriends, write them a "Dear John," whatever you call it, and you feel sorry for them. You think, "Oh, shoot, you know, poor bugger." But then that sort of waned after a while, and after a month they forgot about it too. You know.
When you first got to Vietnam, did you know that it was a 12-month tour?
Yep, yeah, it was 12 months then.
And did you count your days?
Yeah, everyone did that, but then again, I volunteered to do another tour, so I did. I got near the end of the 12 months, and I became a number one, because I didn't start in the troop until late. So I became a number one, and then I had a number two. So I thought I'll stay a bit. See if I can stay longer. So I asked if I could do another tour, like extend my tour, and they said yeah. And then I was going to. I went down with the lieutenant one day to get the maps for a operation, and I'd already done my tour. Then I was 6 days into a couple of days into the next tour. 6 days what it was, and then I went down, got the maps. We drove back up, and someone just came out and said, "Oh, you want it over the duty office?" And so I went over there, and they showed me this like a telegram thing, and I read it, and it sort of said my brother was sick, and I didn't read the name properly because I just thought, "Oh, Barry," because my oldest brother, I knew he'd been injured, and they said, "No, read the name," because most of the sergeants knew my brother, and it was Trevor, and they said, "You're going home." And I said, "Well, why?" And all it said was he had pneumonia, and I said, "Well, pneumonia's nothing." So I said, I was a bit bitchy about that, and they said, "No, pack your gear, you're going." And what had happened in the meantime, Trevor had come home, did his was doing his army training and everything, and then he wanted to go to New Zealand. And he smoked heavy and did a few things, and he went to New Zealand in the middle of winter, but they didn't have the proper clothing for him. They just went over in like greens and stuff like that, and in the middle of winter over there. And anyway, he got sick when he got over there. He had the flu before he went, cold, or Cheryl's family was saying he was coughing and that. And they wanted him to go to a doctor, but he wanted to go to New Zealand. So anyway, went over there and he started getting sick, and then they put him in the hospital, and then they said he had double pneumonia, and then the next minute was Hodgkin's disease. But anyway, what happened was they come home, they got my mother to fly over there because he was in hospital because they knew he was pretty ill. And then my oldest brother was I think he might have been out the army then. Anyway, he was at home with my grandmother one day, and a colonel and a priest come over to see him or something. And they just happened to be talking, you know, and about the family and the photos, and they just said, oh, yes. And he said, where's the young fellow? And they said, oh, he's in Vietnam. And they said, oh, how long's he been there? And they said, oh, over 12 months. So they said, oh, well, it won't be there any longer. And they just went straight back, and that was it. That same day I got the telegram when I was coming home, which I felt a bit bad about, you know. So as I said, they just said to me, go and pack your gear, you'll be going home tomorrow. I can't remember when, the next day or the day after. So they said, just go and pack your gear and go out with the boozer and get on the booze for the night. So that's what I did. Said I don't even remember saying hello to my mates, you know. I must have, but I can't remember that. And that's why I feel bad, because I can't remember the names, and you know, I've never met them. I never met anyone I work with, serve with. I met my mates that I knew down in Vung Tau at the time, but I haven't met the blokes that I work with, and I can't remember their names, and that's what makes me feel bad. You know, you think, did they like, did the bloke that I was working with, my number two, was he killed? I don't know whether he was one of the blokes. I don't think he was, but I just don't know. I don't know how he handled it after that. You know, so that was a bit hurtful, and then and as I said, so they sent me straight home. Then that was my time finished. I flew home and jumped off the plane and come up.
Was that back to Tansenhood to hop on a civi plane, or?
Yeah. I got on the plane at Vung Tau, flew down to Nui Dat, flew down to Tansenhood, and then we had the jet there. We just all climbed on board, and I was pretty uptight at that stage. I was very scared of planes and things, and I remember I was with one of my mates who was coming home, and he said, "Don't worry, sit down." We sat in the plane, and anyway, we took off and pressed the button to have a beer. Everyone got into the beer because it was all free. And drinking. He must have said something to the steward or whoever he was, because we flew for a fair while. I think we must have flew to Singapore or around that way, but I don't think we stopped the way. We just kept on coming home. Anyway, then the steward just come down to me and said, "Would you like to come up the front in the cockpit?" And I said, "Oh yeah." So I went up the front, and it was an old plane, big 4-engine one. They had the pilot, co-pilot, engineer, and they had a navigator seat on the left. So he said, "Just sit down there and watch what they're doing and talk to them." So they weren't doing anything. They were just sitting there looking out the window. So I just sat down and talked to them, and then I looked at the maps, and they just said, "Oh, there's a submerged island, it's partly sometimes submerged, and some island coming up within the next, so can you just find it?" Looking at the window, and I sat nearly all the way back to New Guinea like that. And matter of fact, I think we flew over New Guinea, but that's when I had to go. They asked me to go back in the back, and I went back and sat down. I was all right then. Went back and had a couple more beers, and then I was all right. But that was, you know, they looked after me that way. And then when I came home, and of course the army had taken Mum over there, and she was boarding with the Fiamularos, who are New Zealand people. They're not lovely people, and she was boarding with them. And Trevor wanted me out of Vietnam, because that's what he said to Mum, "I want Steve home." And so then when I got home, I said I didn't know whether to go there or not. Anyway, because he'd already been in hospital 3 weeks or something. 4 weeks or something, and then they said, "Yeah, best if you go over." So I got in the plane and flew over there, and I got met by a sergeant. They took me up to the some big office where the politician was, and introduced me to him, and drove me back. He told me what he could tell me, then took me up to the hospital, and I just walked in. And when I got there, and then my mother turned up, and the doctor, and that's when they told me he was dying. So. And I couldn't understand that. I just, because I hadn't really seen him before that, I just stayed outside. And then when I went in, he just told me himself, and I knew he was very ill. And he just said, "I just want to go home, get me home." And I said, "Well, we'll try and get you home," because they told him he was going home, but they left it too late. He was too sick to get in the plane. I think if I pushed it, I could have, but you didn't know in those days. These days they'd fly him home, but anyway, I stayed there for about a month, and my other brother was down at Kapooka, and he didn't know anything about it either. See, he was just told that he was sick, and that was it. Anyway, they eventually, I rang the eldest brother up and said, "Look, no, he's not coming home. He's dying, you know." And so he must have rang up my brother in Kapooka, and he went and seen his OCO, and because he's only told he had pneumonia, and so the CO just rang up the air base and said, "You got any planes flying to New Zealand?" I said, "Yeah, American one comes around once a month or whatever it is." He said, "Get your gear, go on the plane and you're going." And he flew him over to South Island, then he flew up to me, and we stayed in the army barracks over there for free. And then Lionel had to come home. He was only there for a certain time because I was still on leave. And then Trevor passed away, so Mum and I brought him home then. And that's when I met my father for the first time. Like I met him when I was a baby, but that was the first time I met my father. And then we buried Trevor, and then that's when I sort of lost interest in the army. I started taking Cheryl out then, just as a friend, and I used to take her sisters and that out too. We just all just to go out, and then we just started going on from there. And I just sort of lost a bit of interest in the army, and so I sort of put in get a discharge, and they wouldn't give me a discharge because I just bought a car, and they said I wasn't financial, so they wouldn't let me go. So they said I could stay in Brisbane and not go anywhere, which sort of ruined me. I couldn't go anywhere in the army. I wasn't going to get any rank or anything like that. So I just stayed around Brisbane and drove the transport down to Canunga and places like that, and took the troops around. That's all I did then.
When you came back from Vietnam, did they go to Darwin and then?
No, I don't think they landed at Darwin. They flew straight from Vietnam over and positive. They didn't stop anywhere. It was just because I remember flying over Darwin, and there was massive bushfires up there, went for miles, and then we flew straight down to Sydney. So we didn't really. I don't think we stopped. We stopped going over, but we didn't stop coming back. I'm positive about that. Yeah.
And you said you landed at night. Did you feel like when you thought back on it, did you feel like they snuck you in?
Yeah, well, that's what it was. Yeah, I didn't think about it at the time. All I was interested in getting off the plane and getting somewhere and getting home. And when you look back, that's what it was. That was all sort of keep it quiet. Yeah.
So what was your feeling of getting home? Like, were you excited, or were you, because of the situation with Trevor? How did you feel?
I was excited, but because I didn't really understand the situation with Trevor, because I didn't think he was going to die. I just didn't think anything like that. I thought he must be sick, and I just got home. And once I was home, I felt good. But when I had to leave, I didn't feel too good. But once I got home, I thought, shit, I'm here now. I'm still right. I'll stay here, And then, and then once. Then when I found out how bad he was, even really when I was talking to my nan and that about it, I stayed for about a week, I think, and I said, "What should I do?" And she said, "I think you should go." She said she must have had a feeling or something. She said, "You better go." So I said, "I'll go," because Mum was had been pretty well worn out, and the day I landed, as soon as I landed there, they just said. They just come straight out and said, no, maybe someone else, maybe they knew before they told me, but they just said, no, he won't be going home. No, well, we'll be going home, but not like he is. And that really cut me up a bit. The way, the doctor's doing their job, that's all they're doing. They can't do anything about that. And I couldn't work out why, I knew he drank a lot, he smoked a lot, but he was fit. And like now they say it's Agent Orange has some sort of effect on that part of your body, on your glands and things, and that's where a lot of blokes are getting it.
So it was Hodgkinson's, wasn't
it? Yeah, it was. Yeah. So they put it. Now it's put. People die from it. It's classed as something to do with Agent. Or if you got it, Agent Orange caused it. But in those days, they didn't really know about it. Well, they might have, but no one sort of said much about it. It wasn't pushed. So so he went, and then I sort of stayed home, took Cheryl out, and then I thought I'd get out the army. But as I said, my career sort of ended then because once they said I couldn't leave Brisbane, well, that was it. They won't promote you or things like that. And I didn't expect them to anyway. I didn't really want to be. And then I got out, and then I started. I don't know where I started working first. I think it was for driving a truck first, and then went to the Shell Oil Company. No, I got married before I went there. Sure, and I got engaged, and then we sort of, I worked for, who did I work for? I was married when I worked for Shell Oil Company, so I can't remember now who I worked for when I first got out, because we didn't get married until after I got out of the army. And then, as I said, I worked for Shell Oil Company, the gas company, then the prison service for a while, and then I went, I applied for the fire brigade, but the day I went in and applied, they already started a crew, and they said, "Oh, I'll come back." So I said, "Oh, yes." I went back about a year later, and I put in for it, but in the meantime, I joined the prison service, and they said, "We'll get in touch with you, tell you how you went." But it went on a couple of months or something, and they said by a certain date it was, they were going to let us know. Anyway, it got around to that time, and I went to work one day, and I was really depressed because Cheryl and I weren't seeing each other. She was working, I was working night shift and all these odd shifts, and it wasn't exactly a crash job, And I went in one day and I said, "Bugger this." I picked up the phone, and because I started at 6, I picked up the phone at 9 o'clock and rang up the fire station Kent Place, and I think it was Prickle who answered the phone. He was one of the senior officers, and I said, "Look, what happened? How did I go?" I said, "They were supposed to send me a letter," and he said, "Oh." He said, "Look," he said, "yeah, everyone else has got in." He said, "You've done all right." He said, "You're getting in." He said, "But your medical hasn't come back." And he said, "Oh, what sort of medical do you do to get into the prison service?" I said, "Well, exactly the same one as I did to get in the fire brigade." He said, "Oh, look," he said, "this must have been a Friday, I think it was." He said, "Can you turn up Monday?" And I said, "Yep, I can be there Monday." So I just put the phone down, walked around the corner and said, "I'm resigning. I'll bring my gear back next week." And anyway, I just walked out the door, quit on the spot and walked out. And on Monday I turned up at the front of the Kent Place fire station with all these other guys and joined the fire brigade. And did my basic training, and I went on through there for 20 years. Got to be a senior fireman, and then things just started to go wrong, and then I had basically it made the decision for me. I did a lot of rescue work in the car accidents. So I was with the Jaws of Life. I was one of the first to use it up here in Australia, really. And it just played on me, and not knowing how to get rid of it, and thinking drinking was doing it, helping, but it wasn't. And then eventually I went to a fire. I pushed myself back into Kent Place because I wanted to be around where other blokes where I wouldn't be, like where I was at Chermside, you only had a certain amount of people, and if you're one person short, it made it harder. So I said, "No, I'll go back to Kent Place," because I was already going to see a psych and a psychologist, and I said, "I'll go back to Kent Place and I'll just have a go at, see how I go in there." And I said to him, "I don't want to be hidden. I want to be put on the first pump, and I want to be the branch man, the first man in." I said, "I've got to do that," because I'd been in hospital a few times, so they didn't know about it. I went in, took long service and my sickies, and went in and did 7 weeks at a time in there, and had tablets and things like that. And I said, "No, I've got to try and see whether I can handle it." And we had this big fire this night, and this morning, as a matter of fact, it was a bad night. I had a chemical leak over the south side, and I went over to Anley, and we stood by there all night, and I couldn't sleep. I just sat up, and we got back about 4 o'clock at Kent Place, climbed into bed. 5 o'clock the bells went, turned out to a building on fire down at New Farm, and it was this big house. And I got there and put my breathing apparatus on, and we went in with a light and a hose, and we went up the stairs, and the young bloke I should have taken him, but he took him before me and got up the stairs, and it came up to the big doors, and I don't know whether he opened them or they come open, and anyway the fire come out and hit him and burnt him, and not too bad, just his ears burnt off a bit and his hands, and so we backed out of there, and then he went out the front to the ambulance, and then I said, "Well, I'll go down the side," because we didn't know if anyone's in there. So I went down the side, and I found this doorway with a security door, and I was trying to get in with my axe, and I was really banging it. I couldn't get in, and I was exhausted by this stage because I was carrying my gear and I was running. So I went around the back of the house, and I went back underneath, and I found a stairwell going up, so I went back up the stairwell. I went up the second level, and I got to the top of the stairs, and I could see there was all smoke and all fire on my right. It was in the library, and I look up, and I could see, like, it was all dark, but I could see light up there where there was an exit out that way, and it was black down to my left and the fire to my right, and that's when something happened. I couldn't breathe, and I sat there and I thought, well, something's wrong, you know, and I was checking my set, and then I said, no, got to get out. So I went back down and went out to the pool and stripped all my gear off, checked it out, put it back on, went back in and got to the same bloody spot. And then as I got to the spot, this young officer had just been made up. He come through and he said, come with me, Steve. And I just said, can't do it. And I just walked outside, took my gear off, put it down on the ground, and went out, sat down over the road, had a bit of a cry, and then, you know, then I just sort of said that was it. My career was finished, basically. And then went back to my doctor, and he said, no, he said, it's best you leave. So I did. And you know, he wrote to the commissioner, and the commissioner sort of sent a letter saying, you know, we'll have to let you go. It was nice, you know. So I went. So, and then I started going to the hospital all the time, and I still go. So, and now, as I said, I joined this. I just help these people out up here because it gives me something to do, and yeah, and it's not a full time job, and I only do it once. Like yesterday was pretty bad, and today, well, I'm not doing it today, but you know, but I believe that my idea of it, if you want a pension, you're still getting paid anyway, so you've got to do something, and that's my idea of it.
Did you feel like the training that you had in Australia, the lead up to going to Vietnam, did you think it was adequate?
Yeah. Well. Yes, it was as an infantryman. Yeah. But see, I'm only going on. I don't know what other engineers if they had trained more in mines or booby traps, but we had that problem with the one going off, and everything sort of slowed down then. And then we went to our units were doing more work. See, and we sort of moved away from the fighting side of things. We're doing building of, you know, airstrips and things. It wasn't the war type of things. I never really went on a war exercise with engineers. We just did work, you know. And then the infantry training was bloody good. You know, you were fit. You could go for days. You knew your job. It just all come automatically. I reckon we would have been one of the best armies in the world at the time. Still reckon we would have given them a go today too. But it was just totally different training. Different, you know, our armies really didn't have much compared to like the British Army or the American Army. Our equipment wasn't up any of their standards. You know. Only good thing was our boots were better than the British boots, and better than American boots. But you know, but we borrowed half the gear when we got over there. But the Australian army's always run on a shoestring, I think. But no, I sort of, I think I'm glad I did it. You know, I'm glad I went through it. I think I learned a lot, and you know, and you know, I've had a good life really. So I can't complain about that. Other blokes haven't, but no, that's the way things go.
What are your thoughts on Anzac Day?
Well, I never used to go to Anzac Day. I never really went, and then can't think of the first time I went. I think I went with my brother-in-law. I went, just marched, or I might have went to Debra one day and marched. Debra has every year they have the Lions put on a meal for the veterans, a dinner. And so we went to that. I think I might have went to that, and then I went for a march one day. And then I think I didn't go to the Sydney Welcome Home Parade, but then I went to the Brisbane one. That's basically the start of it. And then I started going, did a couple of Anzac days around here. Then I joined the bike club, and then we go to Anzac days. You know, I march with them sometimes, not all the time. But you know, Anzac Day is Anzac Day. It's for the dead, as far as I'm concerned. It's to respect the dead, and that's why you go.
What about does Long Tan Day mean anything to you?
Not to me, no. Coral was bigger. They won't like that. No. I honestly believe Long Tan it's a public day. It's a private day for D Company and the blokes. It's their morning day, and it's like 3 Battalion Cap Yong Day. It's their battalion day. That's what they did, not no one else. And as I've always said, I think it shouldn't have been a Vietnam Day. It should just stay the Anzac Day. And really, if you're going to look at anyone, they should make it Services Day, and that should be included. The fire, police, ambulance, they all do a good job. The rural fire brigades, matter of fact, they put their lives on the line a lot more than soldiers do. And I think there should be a day for everybody. If you're going to have one, if you're going to have one at all, or just leave it as Anzac Day. That's my opinion anyway. And I know there's a few people that I talk to think the same way. And I know there's members of my club that won't go to Vietnam veterans. We'll ride in with them, but they won't march.
Yeah, so what were you saying about talking about what happened?
Well, I just remember years ago I was told if you talk about things, it makes it better for you, but it doesn't really. It didn't affect me too much, but I talked about it, and I believe if someone asks you, you should tell them. You tell them what you know and how you see it. Everyone sees things differently. You can stand side by side and see the same thing, and everyone sees it differently. So, and if you tell the truth, you just tell what you've seen. You might get your dates mixed up and things out of sequence over a period of time, but you just talk about it. But it doesn't sort of stop you from remembering things and going through your mind. Yeah.
So when you first got back from Vietnam, did you have any problems in the early stages? Did you feel like there was anything wrong?
Oh, yeah. I knew I wasn't the same as everyone else. I didn't believe I was the same. I always felt as if I smiled, I'd crack my face. I didn't feel like my friends were, not that they weren't my friends, but they seemed to be away from me. I can go and be there, but I wasn't really with them. Even, Cheryl's family, I loved them and everything. I loved my own family. Like my brothers I felt good with, other soldiers I felt good with. But out in a group of other people that never served, you just felt a bit funny. I just felt a bit out of it, You didn't know whether they ask you a question about it, and then you start telling them, and some people say, go off, and then they, what are you talking, you talk too much about it. Well, they asked the question. That's when I used to get cranky. If someone asked me the question and said that, I'd say, well, next time keep your mouth shut or I'll punch you in the mouth. Something like that. And people did it to trying to be tough and trying to impress everybody about themselves, but they backed off quick, a lot of them. But no, it's just I did feel different, and even to today, I still feel different. Like kind of might be sad feeling or whatever you call it, but you're not sort of the same as everyone else. I feel different to everyone else. I feel as if, I used to feel as if nothing could happen to me. It's all, I used to think I must be here for a special reason. But I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but that's the way I used to feel, as if I was different, But,
do you know in what way people that knew you before you went, did they see any difference in you when you came back?
Yeah, my mother and that did, yeah. My grandmother did too. Because they used to call me Smiley years ago. There was a movie called Smiley, and my grandmother and my aunt they wanted to put me in for the part, and they used to always call me Smiley. And when I come back, my grandmother just said to me, she said, "You're not the same boy, Steve." And I said, "No, I'm not." And I wasn't. She was right. She just picked it. I was still caring, and I still loved them and everything, but I used to drink heavy. Drive drunk, do all that sort of stuff. In the fire brigade I drank when I was at work, but then again a lot of blokes drank at work in the fire brigade. It was a different era, different type of thing in those days. We're just as good as they are, but we just did things differently. They worked harder in those days in the fire brigade. They worked 2 jobs basically. They might still do it, but a lot of them worked 2 and 3 jobs to pay off their houses, and so they used to go to the pub before they went to work and all that sort of stuff. I just feel different.
And you knew you had changed. Could you put your finger on what it was that changed you, or was it too broad?
Oh, I think, when you sort of, you're living in bad conditions all the time, and you're sort of, and death and stuff, you tend to get a bit, I don't know, cynical or whatever it is, but you tend to get a bit, I don't care type of thing, I can't really put it on. There is a word, I can't think how, Can't think what it was. How I put it. I had it in my head before. Oh, I don't know. It's like your heart's not there anymore. You know, like I feel as if my heart's not there. Even now, I feel as if I love people, but I can show emotion, but I just, I don't know. I feel as if I'm not soft as I should be, or something. I should be a bit more affectionate, or a bit more something different. I should be. I just feel as if I should be something different.
Did you feel like the things you had to do and the things you saw just made you have to become colder?
Yeah. Well, that's basically how it is, because you just, you had to look at it. You were out with your mates. The chances are that someone was going to get killed, and they did get killed. And you weren't going to see them again or whatever. And that's it. It was just sort of, there was no real mourning for it. It was just like, I suppose you could say, going back to the pub and sitting there and have a few beers, that's mourning, but it's not really, because the next day you get up and someone else might have got killed, or the day after. And you don't have to know them like as best of mates, because they're in the same circle as you. There's feeling for them, because it's a brotherhood, and it's, even if it's an infantryman, you think, shit, why should that happen? Or a tankie, it hurts you. You think, oh, well, it hurt me. I used to think, bloody hell, poor bastard. His family's got to go and find out about this, and that type of thing. But it's, and the same thing went on through the fire brigade. When I've heard about, since I've left, a couple of them been killed, and I think, you go through your mind, if I was there, and it wouldn't have done any difference anyway. But you do think about it, and you think, what could have happened. You go through what could have went wrong, if he could have, been saved or something, because you've been through it all.
And when were you first diagnosed with PTSD?
I think about 1993, 92, something like that, yeah.
It's a long time to go undiagnosed, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, well, I didn't think much about it. Matter of fact, I would never have went to anywhere except for my brother, because he wasn't diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, but he had other problems first. And then he just said, go and do something. Oh, yeah, I'll go. It's the same. Yeah, I'll do it one day. And then one day I did fill in a form and send it in, and they sort of sent it back and said, there's nothing wrong with you, because I didn't. A lifestyle form, and when you do these lifestyle forms, you don't feel you feel embarrassed about writing really what you sort of, I won't write that because it feels a bit stupid. You think you're going to get like this. You think you're going to be asked to go in there, and they're going to sit down and talk to you and question, bring it all out. But you write it on the paper, and whatever you put on there is what they take, and that's not really right, because you don't push it. Well, most blokes I know didn't get in there saying, oh, I'm going to get TPI. It's, oh, Jesus, this is an embarrassment, and it was an embarrassment. And like when I had to leave the fire brigade, I was going to the hospital. I was trying to cover it up, because I thought, oh, well, if they find out about it, they'll sack me, because so I lost all my long service and all my sick leave, and then I sort of, in the end, when it came to the crunch, I had to say, well, I can't do it anymore. I wasn't getting TPI, so I just said, well, I'll have to go, and I'll go on the dole. If they want to, I'll just go up and queue up every day like everyone else, because I wanted to keep me home, and I thought, well, at least if I get kicked out of the fire brigade, I'll leave the fire brigade, that'll pay that off. I got me home. They can't ring about that. I would have fought for that, and then I didn't mind going doing the other stuff, until I got better. But it just got to the stage where, as my psych said, I couldn't handle. Like, it's funny because I've thought about it many times since. Oh, I could get, because my mate's in the fire brigade, and I thought, oh, I could go back in. But then when I sit down and think about it, thinking going to work at night time, waiting for the bells to go off, and you think, oh shit, no, I couldn't do that. Or just thinking about it, and it still does, thinking about having to do it full time, thinking, oh geez, no. Or even working in going in a convenience store, having some young person tell you what to do, or stack a shelf, because I'm obsessive compulsive too, and I take long times to do things. I've slowed right, I do things, and I'm a bit awkward, and I could just picture someone saying something and just turn around and go whack, and saying, don't talk to me like that, and that's not the right way to be. You'd end up in jail and you'd lose everything, So I think what they're doing now, like my psychologist is doing a lot with the he's in the Navy. He went in the Navy Reserves, and he's doing a lot with the new Army people now. He goes overseas and meets them and does a lot of talking to them and picking out the ones where they've got faults. You can pick it. I can do it myself. I can go along and talk to people and you think, this bloke's heading for problems, you know. They won't listen to you, of course, until it's too late. Well, not too late, but until they've done a lot of damage to themselves, the families, and then they think, oh shit, I've done something wrong, you know.
When the doctor finally told you PTSD, did the penny drop, or was it just a name to your problems?
Yeah, well, first he said I'm obsessive compulsive, which I was, because that's another thing that affected me. Fire brigade, I couldn't go to bed. Well, I couldn't sleep. At night time, I'd go to work and I'd sit up all night. I'd get there at work and I'd eat lollies and ice creams and Coke and all that sort of stuff. And then I wouldn't go to sleep before 12 or 1. And then before I went to bed, I had to go and I had to make my bed properly, special way, or put my sleeping bag on it. And so I didn't touch the sides and everything. And then I'd go in and I'd have a shower in the showers, and I'd wear my thongs into the shower. Then I'd have to dry myself off, and if I hopped out of the shower and touched the shower screen, I had to hop back in the shower again, and I was washing my hands all the time, and it was getting annoying. And I thought, there's something wrong here. And not only that, all the lockers, the trucks, I just go out, is that locked? And I'd get boom, 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 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like that. And the doors on the houses, I'd get the locks, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I used to count it in my head, and the gas fitting 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Then I'd get 1, 2, 3, 1. And, you know, I'd go into the bedroom and I'd think, oh, did I check the gas? And I'd get back out and go back out for hours and tell Cheryl or the girls, Dad. And quite obviously I knew there was something wrong. And then I started, when I used to leave here and I'd go to work, I started saying hooray to the girls. I'd blow them a kiss, and it started with 3 and 2 each. And Cheryl 3 and 2, and Amy 3 and 2, and Danielle 3 and 2. And then I started doing it up the street. And in the end, I was doing it all the way to Kent Place. And then I was getting tired because my brain was getting tired. I was thinking about it, and then I was thinking about Vietnam all the time. Then I was thinking about car accidents. I'd go back and lie in bed. I'd go to a car accident. I'd lie there saying, if we did it this way, could we do that? And what happened was my brain, I was tired all the time. I was just tired. And I get tired real now, even with just the real fire brigade doing things. I get tired because my brain gets tired, because I'm thinking about a lot of things. Yeah, and that's sort of what happened. Then Graham, I went in to see Graham one day, and that's when he told me. I went in. Graham Jensen's he was the head of psychology, and he knows a lot about post-traumatic stress. And I went in there seen the first day, and he said, I'll have to get you into hospital. And I said, no. And he said, no. He said, 2 weeks. Just put you in for 2 weeks. He said, that's all it'll be. And I said, oh, gee, how? I said, I can't. Fire brigades. So I took off some I think it was sick leave or something. Ended up being 7 weeks in there, and it was hard. It was when I was shattered when I went in. I went into Ward 14 over there, and it was terrible. Cheryl came in with me, and the girl. I don't know if the girls were there that day or not, but I went in and I walked into this ward and looked at all these blokes in there and the beds and that, and I used to get into bed. I remember. Used to make me bed that tight. I'd get in the bed and just lay there like that. And we had this old guy who used to walk around. He looked like Freddy Krueger, and he had a mental problem. But he was a very intelligent man at once. He just broke down. But he used to have this hat on and his coat, and he used to walk in at 2 in the morning looking at the try and pinch cigarettes, and he'd walk in. I said, "There's Freddy Krueger there." He was coming over me. But yeah, and but as you go on, you start laughing at these things. But I don't think I'd like to go through that again. And you get embarrassed. You just used to, but all my family's never worried about it, and everyone I speak to don't seem to think bad of it. So that's the way it is.
And you're talking about dreams. What sort of dreams did you have?
Oh, the ones that come to mind were like those 2 young fellas that were killed. Like I used to have a dream. Well, sometimes I still get it, but it was like one was shot through the chest and blew his heart out, but it was always like, and one got hit in the head, but it was like he was smiling at me all the time.
These are the Vietnamese blokes.
Yeah, like those, because I was looking down at them and they were smiling at me. That type of thing, but not. And like Coral, things would happen, something would happen, like noise, and you dream about Coral again, sitting there in the mud or something like that. I don't understand what they mean by flashbacks. Mine weren't sort of like a camera like they do on TV. It wasn't like that. It was a memory that come back. It wasn't sort of flashing like TV, like instant. It was just, I'd be laying there and I'd have a dream and that'd be part of it. It mightn't be, wasn't in order, like, you know, how things went in Vietnam. It could be different things. It could be those two blokes. It could be Coral. It could be bloke I was with got his arm ripped off here, you know. That type of thing, you know, like a memory, like this arm got ripped off because he had it behind him and that got ripped out there, and he sort of went across to me and I didn't know what he was doing, so I went to grab him and there was blood everywhere and you know, that type of thing, that sort of thing, shit, that just something that happens, or smells. It's not as bad now, the smells, but just occasionally you'll be going something, oh, that smell, and it reminds you of Vietnam. It's and that brings something on. The helicopters always do. I mean, I don't duck and weave, but as soon as I hear a military helicopter, I'll have to go and look at it. You know, I can sit here and pick them up bloody miles away before anyone else does. So there's a chopper and the military one, and you sort of go out and have a look, see what they're doing. You know, but yeah, it's things like that happen. And also they said it could have been the fire brigade, the car accidents, right? But that was more later. And I think the problem, the obsessive compulsiveness, really sort of got aggravated by my war service, and then it got worse as I went into the fire brigade, and then you sort of, it's good to sometimes to go back and go over what you did, because you have debrief. Well, we didn't have debriefs notes, but now it's all debriefs. But it's good to go back and go over what you did, but you can't go back and go over and over and over what you did, because you can't improve. I know that. And I still do it, but I've got to say, nah, don't do it. Or same as the gas. Like my daughter went away last night. It's the first thing I come home, started on the gas again. But now I've been trained and I know how to do it. Same as my breathing. I can breathe deep in my stomach, and I can be out somewhere. I can start myself getting hot, and so I just sit there and just do my deep breathing and calm down, and then I'm all right. And I can get in bed with Cheryl sometimes at night time and I just go sweat, just hot for no reason at all. And but these things happen. There must be something going on. But like you just get used to it, and in maybe 10 years time it won't go away, I don't think. But you get used to it, and if you get if I get distressed, I've got tapes I can listen to, but mainly I go down the backyard. I like looking at animals, and I like to build little bridges. They're not as good as the army bridges, but I do things like that and do a bit of cementing, and that feels as if you're doing something. You feel, and just going to the fire, sweep the fire station out. If I go up and hose the fire station out, it makes me feel good. Just to go up and wanted to clean it up, I feel good. I could, and even if it comes to the stage where I can't do the firefighting anymore, I'll do that. I'll just go up, so I'll come up, clean the station, and make things straight and all that sort of stuff. Because that makes me feel good, and I only have to do a couple of hours doing it. And if I don't feel like it, I just say I don't want to go. It's like I go to hospital every Monday, Friday. I try to go every Monday, Friday, but sometimes you wake up and it's the hard part is getting from here out through the gate. Once I'm out past the gate, I'm all right. It's making that decision to get out of there. Once I'm out and I'm on my bike and I'm on my way, or in the car, I'm all right. I'll go. But then I get tired I get out there and I seem to get tired real quick. And I want to get home, and when we go away on holidays, the same thing. I want to go, but it's the going part. And then when I get away, when it gets near the end, I really want to get home real quick.
Do you think you deciding to live out in the country here, was that part of?
Yeah, I couldn't handle. My neighbours were great. I had good neighbours. Lived on the golf course, the back door of the golf course, but it was just too crowded. I mean, I just couldn't handle it. And I've always wanted a piece of land, always pictured being away from people. Not that I don't like people, it's just that you feel free out here. I mean, I've got a neighbour down there and a neighbour over the road, but they're still a reasonable distance away, and they're not in my pocket. They know we sort of quiet, they're quiet really, they do their own thing. I went over the other day and had a beer with him and had a talk, and my old neighbours here, the same thing, that they shifted now, there's a new neighbour, but and the kids were great. I used to love the little kids, I get a bit nervous around kids because they might get hurt or something. When they run around with pool, I'm sitting there thinking, oh, don't trip, don't fall in, and that's why Cheryl tells me to get lost sometimes. And but I just worry about people hurting themselves, you know.
Going back to Vietnam, what did you hear about the Battle of Long Tan?
Battle Long. Well, we heard basically. Well, there was a mortar attack the night before onto Nui Dat, which killed, I think, a Kiwi or 2 Kiwis. They were expecting some sort of an attack in that time, and I think B Company went out first, but it was undermanned. It only had 108 men or something in B Company, and luckily they sent D Company, which is a stronger company, out to relieve B Company, and they started to head back. And D Company, as they were going through the Long Green there, they spotted a section or a group of enemy, fired on them, and they ran and they gave chase, which I don't. Sometimes to me, I don't know whether that's true, but it just to me it doesn't seem what we normally do. But anyway, they did.
But like, how long was it after it happened that you found out, and sort of what did you hear at the time?
I was in the newspapers just straight away, big action, and I think they said 18 Australians killed, and you know, it was headline news. All the names were written down, and yeah, it was sad, really. I mean, you're in the army, or, you know, and I think it was in the army then. Can't remember, but yeah, you read it and you think, oh, geez, all these blokes killed in one night. You know, like they were killed at the, you know, you were here and they were killed sort of the night before, you know, just not there anymore, they're all dead, you know. And when I go over to the Pinaroo Lawns, you go there and I go through when my brother's buried, and a lot of these mates of mine are buried there, and I go along, look at the graves and, you know, have a chat, you know. And matter of fact, one of my things was I don't believe they've got the right headstones on. I've been going to push it for a long time, because I think they should have the ones with the raised writing on it. They just got flat steel with white writing on it, and I think they should have the ones with the raised, like engraved copper type of ones.
And having served in the Battle of Coral, fought in the Battle of Coral, how do you feel when Battle of Long Tan gets all the attention for it? It's become the representative of Vietnam, Australia's involvement in Vietnam. How does that make you feel?
Oh, sometimes it annoys you because there's a Battle of Cap Yong, which is far bigger than that, and it's not. It's a Korean one, and it's not publicised that much, and it was a big battle, and it was they took on a lot more men, as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, you got to look at it. Those blokes were there, and to be in that situation, especially when I think they only had 60 rounds per man, and it would have taken a lot of guts to even sit there. I mean, there was blokes there that, from what I heard, were pulling out their entrenching tools and opening them up, ready to fight hand to hand. I mean, it'd be petrifying. Not only that, when you got up, and then when they did pull back, and all the dead, well, not the dead, but the wounded finally got out, the next morning their OC, they had to go back in. They didn't send someone else in, which a lot of them thought they would. They sent all them blokes back through, and so when they went and found all their mates lying there in a line in the firing position, all dead, I think that would have been crushing. I think it would have been, I don't know, I wouldn't like to have been there, you know. No, I think, like, I've always looked at it this way. Some people do more than others, but everyone takes a risk. I mean, I've said to other people who've gone on peacekeeping, I said, whether they call it peacekeeping or not, a bit of lead, it doesn't make any difference. If you're the one that cops a bit of lead and you're dead, your life's finished. You don't see anymore, or you're crippled. You know, I don't give a damn if you're the First World War or whatever it is. It's still bad. You know, it's something no one should have to do, but we're not going to stop it, and it's just going to get worse, I reckon. But you look at everyone, and all I believe you've got to do now is say, doesn't happen to anyone else like it happened to us. If we have to go to war, we go to war, but back to people that go to war. If the government makes a bad decision, well, that's the decision it's like going against in the Gulf War. The decision they have to make. They made the decision. You can't hold it against the troops. They've got to go and do what they have to do. So you just look after the troops, and if you look after them properly, like they're trying to do now, maybe they'll make their lives a little bit better. But I still think they'll be affected. Somewhere down the track, something will happen, especially the Special Air Service or something like that. One day they live so highly tense and things down the track somewhere, it'll affect them. But you just keep an eye on it and just look after them. They earn that. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's the right they earn. by going, you know.
What about the RSL?
Ah, the RSL. Well, yeah, well, I never used to go there. I never went to the RSL, really. I came home and I sort of, I joined the RSL. I've been in for a few years now. My mum was a member and my brother was a member, but then they said at first he joined the RSL before he went to Vietnam, and then when he died, they wouldn't put his name on the thing. They said, the older bloke said, no, he wasn't a member, but we had his card and everything. Anyway, his name is there now, and a couple of Vietnam vets are in there, and they went through and they got his name out the front on the plaque and everything, like all the other people, which is we're proud of. That photo inside there of all of us is in the RSL upstairs. Mum sort of asked him to do that, but you know, we're no special people. We're just normal people. It's just that it was a good photo, I suppose, and Mum wanted it up there, and she's been there for a long time. But no, I never went there. I got disappointed in the RSL because I was years ago when I went to Kedron one day and I was just letting people in off the street in front of, more or less in front of servicemen. It didn't have the same thing. I mean, I don't mind people coming in off the street, but the RSL side of it doesn't seem to be really there anymore. It seems to be a privately owned place, and it's not an RSL anymore. A lot of little RSLs would be good because they're just run by people, but a lot of the big ones, it's all money making, and I suppose the RSLs couldn't keep those sort of things going. So you've got to sort of spread it around a bit. But I just find, like, the Gathon's quite good. I go there and I feel quite good when I do go there, only occasionally. No, I feel quite good there, but just some of the big ones, like when you go down the coast and that, it just doesn't feel, it feels like you may as well go to the casino, you know, because a lot of the memorabilia has been taken out and things like that, and that's what it's about. The RSL's about soldiers. You can't get away from that or change the name, you know. It's about the dead soldiers. It's about respect. Like I can't think where we were. I was with my brother-in-law once. We were at an RSL and they didn't even play, what do they call it? Not the last post at night time when they dim the lights. They didn't play it. They just didn't bother. Couldn't be bothered. I think there was in Toowoomba somewhere. Just couldn't be bothered. He was really cheesed off of that.